The following video is a compilation of reviews posted to my channel from August 2017 to June 2019. It covers the entirety of the Digimon anime. Now, while watching this, there may be some weird continuity errors, and that's because I'm presenting this series as if it were going in chronological order for all of the Digimon anime, even though I didn't really cover the anime in chronological order. Also, it includes a brand new version of my original Digimon review, which I decided to redo in order to fit in with my current style. Also, this video is not sponsored, but I am selling a Digimon t-shirt in order to celebrate the finishing of this retrospective. It's modeled after the Digimon Tamers logo, so the links to that are pinned to the top of the comments, and also you can look at my little store shelf at the bottom of this YouTube video. So anyways, enjoy. Digimon, digital monsters. Unfortunately, too many people look at Digimon and dismiss it as a Pokemon clone. And while that's not totally true, it's not totally untrue. While Pokemon had its first release in 1996, Digimon was introduced a year later. But besides starring monsters and having a similar naming convention, Digimon and Pokemon don't share too much in common. Digimon is a sister product to Tamagotchi, but it was marketed directly towards boys. So instead of Tamagotchi's pure baby essence, muscles, weapons, and this. The original Digimon V-Pet had the player raising a Digimon from an egg until it would either die, like all of mine.
This literally happened! Like literally, one after the other. This Tamagotchi is dead, and my Digimon died. Are you kidding me?
Or eventually transform into more powerful Digimon that you could then battle by connecting devices. It was successful, and it spawned video games, manga, a card game, and an anime, released in 1999, Digimon Adventure. Adventure always surprises me when I rewatch it. While the production quality and a questionable English dub makes it harder for newer fans to get into it, there are certain qualities of it that hold up remarkably well. It's an adaptation of a very simple concept, yet it does so much with it. There are dozens of interpretations and alternate universe in which Digimon takes place. The Digimon franchise is like a sandbox that allows pretty broad freedom of storylines and themes. However, some are less like sandboxes and more like a litter box. I actually feel bad for that joke. When looking at Digimon, it really feels like a product of its time. You have a slew of cute and clean monsters that are simply designed because they're adapted from sprite art that would fit into a 16:16 screen. But that's also contrasted by Digimon that radiate 90s Marvel Comics energy, Rob Liefeld straps and all, and that's by design. The Digimon look from this period was defined by American comics, which were having a major surge in popularity in Japan at the time. This Digimon isn't just a T-Rex, it's a T-Rex with a metal war helmet and pecs made out of cannons. And a turtle that doesn't only have Bowser's shell, but Thor's hammer and the face of Jamie Heineman. It's pretty rad. Although I make videos about a lot of nostalgic properties, the ones I really hold close to my heart are Digimon and Animal Crossing. And for Digimon, it's because behind that overly masculine, artillery-carrying, weapon-holding muscles it's a very sincere story about kids, their relationships, and growing up. Digimon Adventure starts with 7 kids at summer camp. After a weird series of weather events across the globe, it begins to snow right in the middle of summer. Suddenly, each of the 7 kids are given a small digital pocket watch-looking thing called a Digivice, and suddenly, a wave comes out of nowhere, sweeping them up and transporting them to the digital world, a Narnia-esque fantasy world that is also home to the Digimon. Suddenly, they all meet their own partner Digimon.
What are they?
We're Digimon, digital monsters.
Buy all our playsets and toys.
While I would argue that most of the Digimon don't go through character development themselves, their personalities complement or contrast the kids they're paired to. There's Tai, the de facto leader of the group. He's got goggles, he's athletic, and he's quick to make decisions. His partner is Agumon. Sora is the helmet-wearing, tough-but-caring, level-headed member of the group. Her partner is Biyomon. There's Matt and TK, 2 brothers who come from a divorced household. Matt comes off as kind of cold and distant, but he's very caring and passionate. His partner is Gabumon. TK is the little kid of the group. He's very excitable, but often is getting into situations where he can't protect himself because his Digimon Patamon can't digivolve to stronger forms as soon as the others. Patamon and TK kind of go back and forth between guiding each other and having to be guided by the other. It's really quite cute. Izzy is the techie big dork big brains of the group. He's infinitely curious and is always trying to learn more about the digital world, which helps us to learn more about it. His Digimon is Tentomon, who may just be my favorite of the original 7 Digimon. He's super supportive of Izzy and is always concerned with his well-being. It's adorable. Joe is the oldest member of the group, and although he has some basic first aid knowledge, he's very squeamish and cautious. His Digimon is Gomamon, who serves as a more fun and outgoing contrast to Joe. Gomamon may just be my favorite of the original 7 Digimon. He's adorable. And finally, we have Mimi. Mimi is initially presented as a shallow valley girl type who just wants to get home, but she eventually steps up. Now, there have been previous watch-throughs where I hadn't liked Mimi, but I really like her now. She's great. She never grows out of her love for fashion or shopping or whatever, but she's still very useful. I like her because many of those qualities are usually associated with a mean girl type character and are seen as negative. However, these are just her interests and they don't impede on her ability to be useful. Her Digimon is Palmon, who out of the other Digimon is closest to resembling the personality of the partner. I love the Digimon cast. Their personalities are so well defined and strong. I feel like you could drop 2 of these characters into a troublesome situation and you would know exactly how they try to solve the problem, how they disagree with each other, etc.
Izzy, I know how to get it to boot up. You just gotta give it a couple of adjustments.
Are your brain cells malfunctioning?
They're characters that present themselves through an archetype of another character we've seen before or are familiar with. So we kind of understand them at face value immediately. It's inviting. But as the series progresses, our idea of that kind of character deepens and evolves. The first few episodes of the show are very light on plot, but it takes time to introduce us to the characters and to the world. It begins with a kind of formula. Each episode features a Digimon attacking the group, and one of the kids gets put into danger, so their partner has to temporarily transform into a more powerful level to protect them from either a bad Digimon or a good Digimon infected by a black gear, which makes them more violent. While the Digimon have 6 stages they can reach, they usually remain in their 3rd form, their base form. While the Digimon have different names in different stages, I'll only be referring to them as their base form to avoid confusion, and I'll be referring to the Digimon characters as their English names, because I'm an English speaker, therefore most people watching this video speak English and probably grew up with the English dub. And I know this is a controversial opinion, but I value clear communication over, flexing my Digimon knowledge to the 10 of you who will care. So I understand if you want to refer to characters as their original names, but please, if you really need to hear Chi and Tail and Yam blank O, if those extra syllables really mean that much more to you, please go elsewhere. Or rage comment down below, the algorithm, you know how it is. A few episodes in, it's revealed a Digimon named Devimon controls the black gears, and he's planning to defeat the children for some reason. That's pretty evil. Devimon separates all of the kids, and while they're trying to find their way back to one another, we get to see some of the characters interact with each other one-on-one. The pairings are great, and it continues to explore their character. My favorite things in ensemble-based storytelling is when characters you wouldn't expect to interact do. Seeing Izzy and Mimi having to problem solve when one is an impatient airhead and the other is a socially unaware dork is great.
Don't cry, Mimi. Oh no, not you too. Izzy, do something. Do what? My laptop can't do everything.
The highlight for this part of the series has always been Matt and Ty having their alone time. Ty wants to head back to where they saw Devimon, and Matt wants to find the others, especially TK. Their arguments result in fighting, which causes Matt to break down and explain how he feels responsible for TK's safety, especially because he feels guilty for not being super involved in his life ever since their parents got a divorce. Throughout the whole show, we're given glimpses into the characters' home life, which helps to inform their behavior in the digital world. While the world is fantastical with all sorts of variations of monsters, the emotional core of the characters are grounded in real-life domestic troubles. Personally, the kind of fantasy I gravitate towards are one with a grounded emotional reality. If the emotional struggles the characters are going through don't have an analog to real life, it's something that's very difficult to identify with, and I truly believe that Digimon finds a great balance. One character I'm sure many younger viewers gravitated towards is TK. While Digimon are evolving left and right and all over the place, TK's Digimon Patamon just can't. This makes TK feel useless, and Patamon's evolution is teased pretty explicitly. There's even an episode where you think they're finally going to evolve, beginning a transformation sequence and everything, but it's just a tease. It's edging, even. When the kids finally get back together, they're told about their destiny by Locomon, a very good-looking, rugged lion man. They explain they're the Digi-destined, chosen children brought to the digital world to protect it from evil. The Digivice links the child to their Digimon, giving it the power to Digivolve. And that's pretty neat. They determine the best chance to get home is to fulfill their destiny and defeat Devimon, and Devimon is like, no. And right when everyone has had a good and embarrassing butt kicking, release. Patamon digivolves to Angemon.
I want to take him home with me.
I'm sure plenty of people do. Angemon beats Devimon by using all of its energy and reverting back to a Digi-Egg. Although Digimon don't die, they need to restore themselves after death.
And my Digimon died.
This shows TK is just as useful and maybe even more so than the others, despite being just a little guy. And also, despite his Digimon now needing to take time to reincarnate, meaning once again, he may be just as useless. I'm sorry, buddy. The Devimon arc serves to introduce the world and the characters. Until the last episode or two, there really isn't a clear plot or goal other than for the kids to survive. So it leaves a lot of time for character and world exploration, but it doesn't meander to the point of feeling purposeless. We see a lot, including quite the variety of Digimon. From bears, squishy guys, slithery guys, sludgy guys, and rhinos. It's really imaginative and interesting. Now, I always knew that Angemon came around to finally beat Devimon, but I'm not sure I ever actually saw the episode as a kid. There are a lot of Digimon episodes I didn't watch while growing up. I didn't see the whole series in its entirety until I rewatched it on YouTube and from around 2006 or 7. And it's not like I really had the option to watch the whole series. In North America, we got 5 volumes of Digimon Adventure on VHS, with the first 3 being sequential and the next 2 being climaxes to later arcs. The first 3 volumes almost completes the first story arc, but is 4 episodes short. However, there was a really rare DVD release in 2002 that had the first 13 episodes on it. There wasn't a proper home video release or even an official streaming release until 2012. And even that release just featured broadcast tape quality episodes with TV ratings either still present or just blurred out in the corners. The original Japanese version was available on streaming platforms a few years ago, but it was taken down, and Funimation, who apparently own the rights to it, haven't done anything with it since. Also, update, as of 2019, Digimon has once again been removed from streaming platforms and digital marketplaces, meaning the only way to watch the original series is to track down the 2012 DVD release, and I'm not even sure if that's in print anymore, Pumpkin. Digimon primarily tells its story through 4 distinct arcs, all of which have a clearly defined final boss to defeat. While I used to think this was a big negative for the show, I've grown to appreciate this almost video game-like style of storytelling, especially after watching the later Digimon seasons. With 54 episodes to get through, there's definitely opportunity for this story to outstay its welcome. But with a 3-act structure being spent on the 10 to 20 episodes as opposed to all 54 episodes at once, the show never quite loses its pacing. It doesn't drag on. And while defeating the villain is always the climax of an arc, it's never the driving factor of the story. The story isn't simply defeat the villain, rather the villain stands in the way of a different goal. At least until the show's final arc. While Digimon's narrative is serialized, episodes feel distinct and separate from one another. It can feel formulaic at times, but the wide cast of likable characters creates enough variation to stay entertained. After defeating Devimon, the kids are sent on a mission across the ocean to collect tags and crests, little emblems that may help their Digimon reach the next stage, and hopefully get them home. However, while traveling across the new continent of Server, the group is being chased and pursued by a super powerful Digimon that also happens to be a chimp doing an Elvis impression.
Something's caught in my network.
He wants to stop them from collecting the crests. That's pretty mean. Well, the first arc was a kind of mindless exploration of the digital world with the most evil looking villain ever. The second arc gives a clear goal while being hunted down by a super powerful, albeit very silly villain.
Where's my fried banana sandwich?
However, the real purpose of the arc is to introduce the crests, which is one of my favorite character development devices ever. The crests remain a prominent part of the story through pretty much the rest of the series. While the crests enable the Digimon to digivolve to their 5th stage, it's also tied to a particular value or trait that each kid exemplifies, whether they directly realize it or not. Courage, friendship, sincerity, knowledge, hope, love, and faith, or reliability if you're watching the English dub. While Digimon would digivolve to the champion level if their partner was in danger, the next stage is only reached if they are able to discover or uphold their particular value in a difficult scenario. So while they all find their crests rather easily, activating them is another issue entirely. At one point, Tai tries to force his crest of courage to activate by throwing himself into danger, but this just corrupts it, causing Agumon to transform into a spooky, scary, evil, skeleton, monster mash Digimon who goes on a rampage. You gotta have that rampage scene. However, it activates truly for the first time during a much more intimate moment. Tai briefly convinces himself the digital world is like a video game and has no consequences. However, he learns the danger in the digital world is real and suddenly becomes really fearful when he has to put his life in danger to protect a friend. It's not during a big fight. He just has to cross through a safe point in an electrical fence. But the point is he's scared to do so. When he builds up the courage to do it, his crest activates and Agumon digivolves using the highest tech animation in the business. Whoa, I love the crests. It's not just reaching a new form and getting more powerful, it's a reflection of how the kids are growing as people. Often when shows have power-ups and transformations, they can seem like a cop-out or an easy way to defeat a powerful villain. But having the kids have to earn it really helps to justify what may have been seen as a deus ex machina in a similar scenario. It's really clever, and I like it. After the fight, Tai accidentally opens a rift in the Digi-Time Continuum and ends up returning home alone. You gotta have that mid-series return home episode. This episode kind of serves as an intermission. It's very odd. No time has passed, it's still the same day from when they left, and nobody is home except for Tai's sister, Kari. This episode always feels off to me, and that's clearly intentional. The colors are subdued, no one seems to be noticing the giant Digimon attacking famous landmarks on TV, and Tai's sister has this creepy demeanor to her, and that's aided by the fact she mysteriously knows who Agumon is. Now, a few years ago, this episode's director Mamoru Hosoda, who is one of Digimon's most influential creative voices, gave an interview comparing Tai and Kari's relationship in this episode to that of a married couple, with Agumon being this new younger girl, taking away Tai's attention from Kari. Now, many people took this quote to mean that Tai and Kari had an incestuous relationship. However, I and many others don't. Please, don't make me believe that not seeing incest is a controversial opinion. This episode just feels off. It's completely different than anything else in the entire season, and I think Hosoda wanted Kari and Tai to have a strange and uncomfortable dynamic to make Tai's return to the human world seem off and uncomfortable. Something's wrong, and it's not that two prepubescent siblings are romantically involved. Tai eventually receives a distress call from the digital world and has to make the hard decision to return to the digital world. I've rewatched this episode randomly outside of full series viewing. It's melancholy, and I feel like this episode's off tone makes it one of the highlights of the entire series. It's just a different flavor, and it explicitly introduces a series-long arc.
Bye, Kari. Bye-bye, Tai. Don't forget about me.
While the kids need to get home at some point, there's also been a responsibility thrust upon them to protect each other and this new world they've been introduced to from danger. It's not just about the self-serving goal of returning home, it's about helping to make the world a better place. When Tai returns to the digital world, everyone is separated and has to find their way back together. Once they do, they are confronted by the mysterious new villain who has been keeping the kids separated while hiding in the shadows, Myotismon. What a spooky guy. The kids are able to find out Myotismon wants to get to the human world to find a secret missing 8th Digidestined, and everyone is like, huh? Myotismon is able to escape into the human world before the kids get a chance to follow them, thanks to the help from Gatomon, Myotismon's top henchman. But eventually the kids are able to go through Myotismon's gate and return to the human world. This is where gets good. So we learn that Tai's younger sister Kari is the 8th child, but nobody else realizes it. They do discover the reason they were chosen as Digidestined is because they all witnessed a Digimon fight when they were very young that was mistaken for a terrorist attack. So it's set up that the audience knows who the new Digidestined is, but no one else does. However, Myotismon has Kari's tag and crest, so he clearly has the upper hand in the situation. I love this arc. Taking the action from the digital world to the human world raises the stakes in such a way that it makes the show feel suddenly really fresh. The Digimon are no longer guides, the kids are. And after being teased of the kids' home life, we finally get to see it front and center. And of course, that's all while they're trying to find creative ways to hide their Digimon. And now while many of the parents are just kind of background and side characters, Izzy's parents, Joe's brother, and Matt and TK's dad become characters heavily involved in the plot. At this point in the show as well, not all of the kids have had their crest activate. So the activation of their crests happen as a result of their family life or being close to that. While of course there is a bunch of insane action in this arc, or at least the implication of insane action, there are also some nice moments and somber moments as the kids finally get a moment to rest and reunite with their families. While the kids are searching for who the 8th Digidestined could be, Myotismon is out wreaking havoc with super strong Digimon and sucking the blood of young women. We learn that Kari is the 8th Digidestined before anyone else does. However, Gatomon starts to suspect Kari as the 8th child. However, Wizardmon, Gatomon's BFF forever, or at least BFF for now, starts to suspect Gatomon as Kari's long-lost Digimon. However, this turns out to be the case. And it's the reunion of the two that makes Kari's identity known. So Gatomon may be my favorite of the original 8 Digimon. That's because Gatomon is the only Digimon that is actually their own character. Now, Gatomon is a villain. However, eventually we learned through Gatomon's best friend for soon, Wizardmon, that Gatomon was not always a villain. Kari was supposed to go to summer camp with everyone else, but she was sick, so she couldn't. So while the other partner Digimon got paired with the kid, Gatomon waited forever and was eventually taken in by Myotismon, where they became a villain after years of abuse. Myotismon figures out Gatomon is the 8th Digimon and uses that to discover that Kari is the 8th child, resulting in a big battle to rescue her. Wizardmon, Gatomon's best friend for no longer, sacrifices themselves to protect Kari. The crest is returned, it activates, and
Gatomon, Digivolve 2!
yes, Anjawamon. So anyways, Anjawa defeats Myotismon, but he reforms into a big strong form, and luckily, Tai and Matt unlock their Digimon's final form, or I guess this isn't even their final form, to defeat the super strong Myotismon. In my opinion, the Myotismon arc is the climax to Digimon Adventure. While not every personal issue is nicely wrapped up at this point, there are confrontations and small glimmers of closure that could potentially come at a later point. One of my favorite moments comes towards the end of the story. TK and Matt have proven themselves to be of value and strength to their parents who haven't seen each other in however long, and TK, being the young naive kid he is, thinks this reunion is happy. And although he's not wrong, there's a kind of somberness surrounding the whole situation that he really doesn't understand. You know, obviously their parents aren't going to get back together, but it's oddly hopeful. Like maybe this is a start of their family not being as distant as they were before. And this closure or hopeful confrontation of these issues is relevant for all of the characters' personal struggles. Although Gatomon is just a good character, they're able to overcome their abuser by letting others come into their life to help. It makes Myotismon a very personal villain, and the only Digimon Adventure villain that isn't just bad guy, evil baby boy. As a kid, I loved the conclusion to the Myotismon arc. It really justified liking Digimon to me. Not just because it was super cool, but to a certain extent, I understood that these more personal issues weren't things that were generally confronted in children's media. And I think that's why Digimon has continued to mean so much to me, despite what's holding it back. And I guess we can discuss what's holding it back. The first and most glaringly obvious issue with Digimon, especially now, is the English dub. I grew up with the English dub. I like it. I consider the voices of these characters to be defined by the English cast. However, early on in the dub, you can tell someone involved was embarrassed by Digimon. Jokes are consistently added where they shouldn't be. And 90% of the time, this is fine, but more often than it should, it undermines the emotional tone a scene is going for. And sometimes they even point out and make fun of the limited animation.
Won't leave your pee. Whoa, time's standing still here.
There are also a lot of characters whose voice is based on famous comedians or actors, including Peter Lorre, Rodney Dangerfield, and Marlon Brando.
I'll take you there myself. It's not every day your lunch saves your life.
That's the story of my life. No respect. I don't get no respect at all.
But I think the best voice in the whole dub is Togemon. Togemon is Palmon's first evolution, and you know they thought it was silly. I mean, it's a cactus with boxing gloves. How does it type with those boxing gloves on?
You're going down, big boy.
You could tell they had a blast voicing and writing this character. And while not a major critique of the dub, there are also some dubbing errors, like the wrong voices coming from the wrong characters.
Hey, check it out. You can see right through this wall.
And this odd moment where some kid broke into the recording studio and sent off the broadcast tape before anyone could notice.
Billiam, over here.
Huh? Well, so much.
There is still no official explanation from this, and people have asked the English producers. Like any dub of an English anime, there are also many censored changes that are made because of cultural norms. Some mild swearing is cut out, mild nudity, and references to alcohol are cut too.
All right, it's a bottle of green chili sauce. It's great on tacos.
The dub also uses its own music. While a lot of the music is recycled from other shows, several tracks were written exclusively for the Digimon show, including the main Digimon theme, which I love nostalgically but is a major turnoff for new viewers. There were also victory songs written for when the Digimon were winning a battle. The folksy "Hey Digimon" excels at killing the mood of the scene it's played in.
Hey, Digimon, awesome friends to the morning.
But nothing is as bad as the Digirap. However, there are also great orchestrated tracks that I still associate heavily with Digimon, including the instrumental version of the main theme that plays during heroic moments. However, what's lost in return are two of my favorite anime songs ever. Braveheart, the awesome guitar riffing song that plays during evolution sequences, and Butterfly, which I can say may be one of the best anime opening songs ever. While there are many questionable changes made in the English dub, the dub was not handled by 4Kids, so many things you would expect to be cut out aren't. There are a lot of mature themes and concepts that are fortunately kept in, including references to the number of the beast, 666, that's so metal, and mention of terrorist attacks. But this was before 9/11. Furthermore, all references to the story taking place in Japan are kept in. While I would definitely recommend newcomers track down the original Japanese version, I do think the English dub is forgivable because it makes an effort to respect the material, eventually. Matt's dad? Are you smoking? Not in my Christian English dub. Of course, the second thing holding Digimon back today is the production quality. Although there are some great shots in Digimon that are animated well and the transformation sequences are phenomenal, the vast majority of action is very simple, with still frames being motion tweened, attack animations being recycled over and over, and sometimes the same shot repeating. Matt, where are you going? Also, the evolution sequences often take up huge chunks of the episodes, but fortunately they will speed them up, cut out shots, and split screen the evolutions occasionally in order to keep up the pace of action sequences. And occasionally there are whole episodes where characters are just off model. It's very odd. After defeating Myotismon, a rift between the digital and human world opens up in the sky, and the kids learn they have to travel back to the digital world to finish off the final bad guys, the Dark Masters. 4 full-level Digimon that once wreaked havoc across the land, but were defeated by the group of original Digidestined. Just a side note, this one frame inspired so much curiosity as a kid. Like, they gave no more detail other than just mentioning them. While I like the Dark Masters storyline, it's definitely a classic last battle kind of story. Their strength is tested, their relationships are tested, and their roles within the group are tested. Throughout this entire arc, everything has changed. The Digimon they all met along the way are dying all around them, and the source of reincarnation for Digimon has been put on pause, meaning the stakes are higher than ever. It's a pretty tense arc, and there are some great character moments, but I think the purpose is to just give the kids one final test to show how much they've grown. And while there is certainly continued character development, some lore development, and more, it's really about the kids taking responsibility just because they have the power to do so. There are some highlights like the return of Locomon, just to have him die. You gotta have that Locomon death. I also like how the other kids don't take a back seat here. There's a massive power gap between them, Tai, and Matt, which is something that definitely becomes a huge problem in later seasons. But fortunately, they don't take a back seat. The final Dark Master is defeated when TK's crest finally activates after a whole series to forget that it hadn't already. A big fun final battle follows that's just what you'd expect from a large ensemble action piece. But now, the first time the angel came out of nowhere to save the day, it's like, that's pretty great. He's pretty handsome too. The second time the angel came out of nowhere to save the day was like, that's pretty great. She's pretty handsome too. But then the third time the angel comes out of nowhere to save the day, it's like, that's pretty repetitive, regardless of how handsome you are. The first two were punctuation for a character arc, and here it's finally the activation of TK's crest, but it seems like it was only withheld to have this cool reveal. However, the Dark Masters aren't the final villain. There's another final villain, the evil Apocalypse. That's pretty scary, but they beat him too. Pretty good. The celebration for their victory is short-lived. The series ends very suddenly, and it comes as a shock to the audience and to the characters. The gate between the worlds are closing, and without much time, they have to say goodbye to their Digimon. It's really sad to see them say goodbye, but it's not a depressing ending. They'll see each other again someday, and we know they're ending their adventure as more complete people than when they started. Digimon Adventure has remained one of my favorite pieces of childhood media. It's a story that is very silly at times, and the issues surrounding it are not insignificant enough to ignore. But this is a story that succeeds in spite of pretty glaring flaws. That's because the character work is very sincere. Even though it's surrounded by silly concept, crazy monsters, and edgy try-hard 2000s character design, the good qualities are able to shine through in spite of it. I mean, as long as what they're trying to shine through is not the show's biggest flaw, which is the Digi-Rap.
Digimon!
The next video is a review of the first Digimon movie. Now, if you hear me say a number throughout this entire video, that means I am covering one of the movies, and the number is just signifying which movie it is. Number 1, Digimon Adventure, released in 1999. This film was released as a part of a Toei film festival which aimed to preview upcoming Toei projects. It was directed by Mamoru Hosoda, who would later go on to direct some highly critically acclaimed films, including The Girl Who Leapt Through Time and The Boy and the Beast. Although the film serves as a preview for Digimon Adventure, within the series itself, it actually ends up playing a pretty important role in the plot. Also, side note, I am going to be using the English names just because I think it's what my audience will be most familiar with. One day, Kari and her older brother Tai receive a special egg through a computer screen. It hatches the fun and energetic Koromon, who, as the movie progresses, grows into larger forms. At one point, Koromon escapes with Kari and Tai has to chase after them. Eventually, a much larger egg comes from the sky and hatches a giant parrot Digimon. Koromon grows one last time to defeat it before disappearing. In the Digimon movie, I always loved this segment, but while watching the original version, it's clear a lot of the tone and style is lost. It's mysterious, it's slow building, and when the final battle hits, it's exciting and terrifying. I mean, this shot wasn't in the English dub. I love giant monster films, and although Digimon always features giant monsters, it never truly feels kaiju. But in this, the low angles, property destruction, and human perspective really makes it feel like a proper Godzilla-mon film. Even the final fire blast from Greymon feels like Godzilla's atomic breath. I also love how much like small children Kari and Tai are. Although they are kids in the anime, it's definitely an anime protagonist kind of kid. They're small, but they're just as intelligent as a young adult. But here, they're little kids, totally helpless. It's fun and exciting and definitely worth that 20-minute runtime. Number 2, Children's War Game, or R War Game as the posters and most wiki articles call it. This film was also directed by Mamoru Hosoda. It has a 40-minute runtime and was released on March 4th, 2000 as a part of the same festival which showcased Digimon Adventure. March 4th is also when the film takes place. What a neat and fun fact. This film, wow. I truthfully think R War Game may be the crown jewel of all the Digimon films and maybe even of Digimon itself. Well, not as a standalone work, but as a part of the Digimon Adventure series. Taking place over spring break the year after the kids get back from the digital world, a Digimon has invaded the internet and begins tampering with computer systems around the globe. Izzy is the first of the original Digi-Destined to take notice and heads over to Tai's house to warn him of the danger it can impose. After nearly a year, Izzy and Tai are able to get back in contact with the Digimon, but this time over the internet. Unfortunately, for a multitude of reasons, they're unable to get a hold of the other children to help tackle the threat together. Eventually, Matt and TK are contacted and they try to take down the Digimon before it can detonate a nuclear warhead in Tokyo Bay. Our War Game is tense, it's heartwarming, and it's entertaining as heck. What makes it interesting is the logistical challenge between accessing the internet in the early 2000s and a fight against a strong enemy. If it were just one of these things, it'd be fine, but it's the combination of two which makes it cool. I really like it in action scenes when there's multiple things to worry about. It's not just a fight, but there's something else going on as well. When Tai and Izzy are having trouble contacting people, have their internet connection go out, or when Matt and TK can't find a computer connected to the internet, it helps make the action relatable because everyone with an internet connection has run into similar issues when trying to do a much more mundane task, like sending an important email or submitting an assignment. Even the solutions the characters find to these problems feel real, like the satellite cell phone, the voicemail tag, etc. Also, because we feel for the characters already, when War Greymon and Metal Garurumon have their butt kicked, it's pretty hard to take. If this were a standalone film, I don't think that would be the case, but that's the benefit of working with established characters. You can do mostly plot-driven stuff because the audience is already sold on the characters and the world. I mean, Matt is barely in the movie, but we're still sad for him when his Digimon is hurt. When War Greymon and Metal Garurumon combine at the end to form Omnimon, it's awesome, and that final stab to Diaboromon's head is wicked cool. In fact, Hosoda liked this film so much that he ended up taking a lot of the concepts and remaking it from the ground up without Digimon in a film called Summer Wars. Both Summer Wars and Our War Game are definitely worth a watch. Digimon. On the surface, it's a Pokemon clone, but once you dive deeper, you discover it's actually a Tamagotchi clone. But for boys. Digimon's style was influenced by cool things like Marvel Comics, but I think they took a little too much influence from Rob Liefeld. Look at this dinosaur with pecs. The concept is simple enough. You have digital pets, digital monsters, Digimon. As you raise them, you take care of them and they transform into bigger Digimon. The anime adaptation, Digimon Adventure, which really only existed to promote and sell a line of toys and video games, took this simple concept and made a heartfelt story out of it. 7 kids on summer vacation are transported to a magical world, the digital world. While trying to survive in this new environment and get home, they're each given a partner Digimon and a Digivice, which helps them to channel the bond between them and their Digimon. The animation in this show sucks. You probably start to notice it around the 78th time an attack animation is recycled in the same episode, so characters are used as a crutch for the lack of exciting action. As the kids grow up and develop, their Digimon are able to reach stronger forms, or Digi-evolve. Eventually, the kids take on the responsibility of Digi-Destined to save the digital world from evil. It's flawed, it's silly, but it also grounds itself within its characters. The original series holds a special place in my heart nostalgically, but for some reason, despite watching it on TV just as much, I can't say the same for Adventure 02, the sequel. I think it's because there weren't as many home video releases, so maybe not having access to it all the time resulted in less of a connection.
It's weird because as a kid, I remember liking 02 significantly more than the original. But that's probably just because the main Digimon was blue, and my favorite color was blue. My critiquing skills haven't grown up that much.
Adventure 02 has more animation than Adventure. It's not high quality animation, but there's more of it, just like how there's more characters. They aren't high quality characters, but there's more of them. Adventure 02 takes place 3 years after the original show. It's not Digimon Adventure 2, it's specifically 02, referencing 2002, the best year. The year of blue. If you're watching the English dub, all of the original kids are now in high school except for the younger ones, TK and Kari. For the most part, the older kids are sidelined for the new team. TK, Kari, Yoli, Cody, and Davis, all of whom are introduced and reintroduced in a messy first 2 episodes. There's a lot of exposition, yet hardly any time is spent introducing the new kids to the world. 02 aired only a week after the original series finished, so the audience didn't have to be reintroduced to anything, but hearing the new kids spit out digital world jargon is odd because they haven't had anything explained to them yet.
Digi-Armored Energize!
The key narrative difference with the original is the fact that no one is trapped in the digital world. The new team is given a new Digivice called a D3, which can be used to open up gateways to the digital world from any computer. So the older kids have to catch a ride with the new ones. Usually 1 or 2 of the older kids will tag along, so they're not completely absent, just completely useless. The D3s are an important plot point and tie into the show's primary villain, the Digimon Emperor, the first human villain in Digimon. The Emperor uses a dark Digivice to take control of wild Digimon and block the original kids' Digimon from transforming to higher power levels. He amplifies this power throughout the digital world using dark cell phone towers called Dark Spires. The new kids get around this through a new transformation, by using power from Digi-Eggs and the new Digivices to equip their Digimon with Digi-Armor to armor Digivolve into Armor Digimon. Now that's branding. On a side note, Digimon Adventure bred all of these cool Transformer-style toys where you take one Digimon and transform it into another. Digimon 02 had a similar line, but instead it was just eggs. Which is lame. The ability to go in and out of the digital world kind of eliminates the greater sense of adventure that Adventure had. There's no camping or scavenging for food, they just go home to their beds at the end of the episode. There's less urgency, and sometimes it's tedious. They go out for a bit, destroy a couple control spires, maybe find a new Digi-Egg, rinse, and repeat. Often it feels more like they're running errands rather than having this great adventure. It's also hard to accept these new kids are automatically invested in what happens to the digital world. They take on the objective to defeat the Emperor immediately. In Adventure, their objective at first was self-serving. They had to get home. It was only later they took on the greater responsibility of protecting the digital world. Poor format aside, when the show is on, it's really strong. We're soon introduced to Ken, the real identity of the Digimon Emperor. In episode 8, Davis plays a soccer game against Ken without knowing he's the Emperor. I love it! Dramatic irony. But by the end of the episode, Ken reveals his identity and runs away from home to live in the digital world. Getting rid of Ken's human world storyline makes this side of the story more of a weight onto the plot. This could have been a great opportunity to build dramatic irony and differentiate the sequel from the original. Maybe Ken gets close to the team without them knowing he's the Emperor. He could find out information about the kids' lives and use it to his advantage. But the only dramatic elements that come from the human world side of the story are the kids having to hide their Digimon from and to find excuses to tell their parents when they've been spending time in the digital world. At this point, it's stale and a missed opportunity for something new. Still, Ken is the most interesting villain from either of the series. This is the first human villain Digimon has had, and it's also the first villain with depth. It's a lot more depth than a monkey doing an Elvis impersonation. I mean, he kicks a puppy. Ken's partner Digimon Wormmon tries to act as Ken's conscience, and we get a sense that Ken hasn't always been the puppy-kicking type. He's messing around with the darkness of the digital world, which is something he really doesn't understand. When he tries to make his own Digimon, he ends up stealing data from Devimon, the first villain from the original series and a bit of a sore spot for TK. TK's Digimon died in a battle with Devimon. Digimon get reborn, so don't worry about that. So seeing Ken screw with Devimon is the turning point. It's one thing when Thor Turtle Jamie Heinemannmon attacks the magic vampire, but it's another feeling entirely when two kids are punching each other in the face.
When you can't think of anything to say, do you always resort to fighting?
I guess.
The scene where TK confronts Ken is so tonally different from any other part of the show, but that's why it works. No other villain in Digimon has ever doubted themselves. They're cartoon villains, unable to question their moral alignment. But Ken is human and able to change. And when I say change, I don't just mean the kitty cat turning into a scantily clad angel whose figure now costs $4,000, I mean character development. Ken getting his ass kicked and losing his Digimon opens his eyes to all the dumb shit he's done. We learn Ken hasn't always kicked puppies, but his turn to darkness began through his grieving, after his older brother was hit by a car and died. Digimon has always dealt with these heavier domestic family issues, but having a character become a villain and go through a redemption arc as a result of their problems takes the concept to another level. That's what a sequel should do. Ken is eventually brought into the team and becomes a core member. But all that development is thrown out the window when they explain Ken just had an evil spore inside of him, which made him evil. Because why have a complex character when magic? Digimon Adventure 02 spends its first 21 episodes dedicated to the Digimon Emperor arc, which eventually wraps up, but not without distraction, and there's a reason for that. After Adventure wrapped up, 2 new creative directors were put in charge of the story, replacing the original director who left to protest a sequel being made. Between their disagreements and studio meddling, the show never found a clear direction after the Emperor storyline. New storylines are introduced and dropped, new antagonists come in and distract from developing plots, and plot lines are introduced only to have a quick, anticlimactic ending. We eventually learn that someone has been controlling Ken, then we learn that person was controlled by somebody else, before finally learning that Myotismon, the best known villain from the first series, was behind it all. Its inclusion feels tacked on, and that's only because it was. Between it, there are small moments where they attempt to recapture the emotional moments from the Emperor storyline and attempts to expand on the lore, but it's ultimately lost amongst the rest of the mess. The show ends with an epilogue, which sees much of the cast pursuing out-of-character careers. It left a bad taste in my mouth. Speaking of bad taste, there are 2 major storylines which were dropped entirely. The first was hinted at as early on as episode 13. We get a tonally strange episode apart from the Emperor storyline where Kari is brought to this weird alternate dimension between both worlds called the Dark Ocean. At the end of the episode, we hear this sinister music as this dark, giant, silhouetted, evil, Cthulhu-ass looking Digimon rises out of the ocean.
Who is this evil, dark, undersea master? Don't miss the upcoming Digimon, Digital Monsters.
We never hear from it again. Digimon Wiki says it's Dragomon. Wow, this is so much cooler than what we ended up getting. Episode 13 also sees the return of the show's greatest villain, the Digirap.
Digi-Dudes will Digi-Rule with Digi-Ability and Digi-Tool.
The second drop storyline is Daemon, who shows up only a few episodes before the series is over and is defeated a few episodes later. Filler within the final 8 episodes. Daemon is defeated when it gets sent to the Dark Ocean. 2 dropped plot lines resolve each other. Instead of Myotismon, Daemon should have been the final villain and have been revealed to be Devimon fully evolved. Daemon is in Devimon's evolutionary line, and it would have bookended the beginning of Adventure with the end of 02 and had a nice little tie into the original series. There are some nice nods to the original series, which are nice. And the plot of the Digimon film Our War Game is important to the new characters. The new kids were chosen to be Digidestined after witnessing the internet battle featured in Our War Game. This also leads to hundreds of Digidestined around the world. My favorite series of episode post-Emperor, and actually probably in the whole series, is the Digimon World Tour arc. This sees the old kids teaming up with the new kids and traveling across the world. But I think maybe the reason I like this short saga so much is because it takes place over winter, and all the characters are in cute winter clothes. Aesthetic. We see new Digidestined and get a chance to see the characters interact one-on-one. And there are also some nice episodes which allow us to see how the original team has grown up over the years. The quiet, personal moments of Digimon are where the show shines. However, I like this arc because we got to spend time with the old cast, and that's a problem. The original show had this really simple plot, so character was always the focus. But the convoluted nature of O2 makes it harder for the characters to develop because it's always changing direction. TK is shown to have trauma, but it never manifests itself in anything but anger. TK is the obvious choice for team leader, but because Davis has goggles, he's chosen despite being totally incompetent in a leadership position. He's the least interesting character and a little shit. Kari, like in the original series, unfortunately never has time to grow. The Dragomon and Dark Ocean storyline seemed like it would be dedicated to her, but her relationship to the Dark Ocean never manifests itself in anything other than her grabbing her head and screaming. Yoli? Well, I like Yoli. She's fun. But Cody is the worst. Let me rephrase that. Cody is treated the worst. He's the youngest member of the team. His arc is him coming into his own and being seen as a valuable member. In the original, TK also had to prove himself as the youngest member. But the difference is the reason why they had to do so. TK's brother, Matt, was overprotective of him in Adventure, but everyone in O2, the characters we're supposed to like, are just totally dismissive of Cody, so his arc requires everyone else to be a jerk. Ken is the only character who's fleshed out, and everyone else's development has to do with their relationship to him. In Adventure, the kids were given crests, representing a trait they best exemplified: courage, friendship, love, etc., which tied directly with their Digimon getting stronger. The Digimon transforming was really symbolic of their own growth. However, in O2, most of the transformations are tied to the Digi-Egg, so most transformations are earned through finding an object instead of character growth. However, to continue to make the old team completely useless, it's revealed that they gave up their crests to protect the digital world in their absence. This creates a few tiny, massive plot holes, but that's just nitpicking, so let's not really get into that. I mean, I don't mind when they make an exception to the rule. The new kids get around this by DNA digivolving, which sees two of their Digimon combining into one. This should be tied into a big character moment, but it actually helps create a big character moment. When Ken and the team are still unsure about working together, Ken and Davis's Digimon come together to form Pyildramon. It's only then that they start to consider the possibility of Ken joining the team. Pyildramon should have only been possible after they all forgave Ken. It would have symbolized their coming together. Even later, DNA Digimon feel underwhelming and unearned. It's just a result of the other kids deciding it's time to let their Digimon come together. As for the new Digimon, they serve the same purpose as they did in the original series. They're either character complements or character contrasts for the human characters, which works a lot better than having them be their own unique characters. The new Digimon are Armadillomon, a Western armadillo, Hawkmon, a hawk, and Vmon, whose English voice sounds like Sid from Ice Age.
Something about Kari. Human girls make human boys act sorta weird.
Digimon is known for its odd English dub, and the dub is as dumb as ever. The actors do a good job, but moments in between drama and action have bad jokes stuffed inside them. Most of them miss, but some actually had me laughing out loud.
Then how does the story of the birds and the bees go?
Later, Davis. Now's not the time.
What do you guys want to play?
How about strip time?
Unlike the original series dub, dramatic moments are allowed to play out without added humor, but the choice in sound effects will often be used to undermine the violence.
It's going to win!
One thing Digimon has always been good about were references to Japan being kept in, which is unusual for an English dub, especially for a children's show. The show isn't afraid to call a donut a rice ball.
So I made you some rice balls for your trip.
These donuts are great!
I don't mind the dub so much this time around because the show is a lot more tedious. This plot with a serious tone would just be boring. There are a lot more pop-punk songs featured in the dub, all of which are on the Digimon movie soundtrack, which would be the greatest film soundtrack in history if it were not for the Digirap. And here's a little side note, on the official DVD release of the English dub, sometimes a TV rating stamp will appear in the corner. I wouldn't be surprised if a clean version of the English dub just didn't exist. There are Blu-rays of the Japanese dub available, all of which have great quality, but it's doubtful that there would ever be a new master of the English dub because Digimon has been relegated to a very niche thing. The new characters just aren't nearly as strong as the original, and they're still splitting screen time with the old cast, who always steal my attention when they're on screen because that's who I care about. I don't hate the new characters. I enjoy watching them interact with the old cast and, you know, Ken, but the show would have worked a lot better if more focus was put onto them or if they were just taken out entirely. This show could have worked with the old cast while only introducing Ken as a new character. This is a show based on characters, and when the new characters don't add anything, that's a problem. Digimon Adventure has an ongoing sequel film series called Digimon Adventure Tri, and within the first few minutes of the first film, we learn the new characters introduced in 02 have been defeated and are nowhere to be seen. The older kids don't seem to miss them very much, and much of the audience doesn't either. If Digimon Tri continues after its 6-movie run, I'd like to see them return, but it's not something I'm disappointed about. Digimon Adventure 02 is such a mixed bag. When it's on, it's really strong, but its good moments are so far and few between. Once it gains momentum, it quickly drops, and interesting ideas are forgotten before they have time to develop. Even though its cast as a whole isn't as strong as the original, the more complex ideas are more interesting when the show is willing to explore them.
The cool thing about the Digimon anime series is despite the fact that this really is just a glorified film and video game commercial, the creative team behind it really cares and really tries. Digimon Adventure 02 didn't fail because people didn't care about it. It failed because 2 creative directors fought for their own creative vision. And at the end of the day, that's really cool.
Number 3, Digimon Hurricane Touchdown / Transcendent Evolution The Golden Digimentals. That's a long title because it's actually 2 titles. This film premiered during the Summer Toei Film Festival, only a few months after our war game. It aired in 2 parts with another short airing between the 2, and it was later released on DVD. Before I made this video, this was actually the only Digimon movie I hadn't seen in its original form, and because of that, it totally surprised me. It's pretty good. While visiting Mimi in America, TK and Kari come across a boy named Willis who's tracking down an evil Digimon. Mimi, along with the other original Digidestined, are captured. The rest of the 02 gang, Davis, Yoli, and Cody, get word of this and travel to America to help TK and Kari rescue the original Digidestined. Once there, the gang meet up with Willis and his Digimon Terriermon as they head to Summer Memory, a spot where Willis, Terriermon, and his twin Cocomon, the original form of the evil Wendigomon, originally met. At some point, Cocomon was struck with a type of virus and turned evil. It meets up with Willis years later, but is unable to recognize him. So he starts kidnapping all the other characters with the same Digivice and turning them younger in hopes he'll recognize them as Willis. The other kids help Willis track down Wendigomon, who gets progressively more and more removed from its original form in hopes that they can save the other kids. While these shorts are by no means excellent, they are pretty good. In the Digimon movie, they received the worst treatment, with nearly 30 minutes being cut from the original hour runtime. What resulted were these frantic, nonsensical action pieces cut together with awkwardly paced dialogue scenes. The original piece is the exact opposite. It's slow, it's filled with these little funny quiet moments, and the action is anything but exciting. In fact, it's a bit depressing. Wendigomon is Willis's Digimon, and because it has become a danger to others, Willis has to come to the conclusion to kill it. And that storyline is never lost within the tone of the film. What should be exciting action scenes are undermined by this slow, creepy music and the characters getting genuinely stressed when they see their Digimon get hurt. You really feel that this is a hard decision for Willis to come to. When Wendigomon is finally defeated, there's not a big triumphant attack, it just ends, almost anticlimactically. I mean, of course, there's a cool new Digivolution and Angel-Woman shows up, which isn't related to anything, but I still enjoyed it. This wasn't what I was expecting it to be. It's a little bit of a bummer and a low note, but if you like Digimon, I definitely recommend watching it. It's interesting to see these characters in a cleaner constructed plot than Zero Two. Zero Two is such a mess that it's really easy to nitpick, and the characters are more likely to get on my nerves. But in this context, I think they work. For example, because of the more subdued tone, Davis's frantic personality works a lot better. It balances out. Also, if you look at it, it appears many of these plot points were repeated in Digimon Tri, just with the cast swapped. I mean, the original kids go missing, and due to an infection, a new member of the group has to come to the conclusion to kill their Digimon. The only difference here is the Zero Two kids care about finding the original Digidestined, and in Tri, they quickly forget about it. Huh. I guess the difference between the Zero Two cast and the original cast are the fact that the Zero Two cast are actually good human beings. Apparently. Hey, so this spot used to have my original Digimon The Movie review. However, I used a lot of copyrighted music in that video, and this video kept getting copyright claimed, so I decided just to remove this segment altogether. If you want to go see my original Digimon movie review, which is very angsty and over-exaggerative, I'll post a link in the description or at the end of this video. Number 4, the Digimon movie. Okay, so I know I talked about this one in a whole 20-minute video, but I wanted to have another go at it, because it made it seem a lot worse than it actually is. Since going back and watching a lot of Digimon, I've realized I really do appreciate the Digimon movie for what it is. It's silly, it's funny at times, and its soundtrack is truly awesome. It introduced me to a lot of music that I grew to really appreciate as an older teenager, and it definitely is a fun watch for Digimon fans, even if it's a total disaster from outside observers. What I'm saying is, it's fun, and it has the one thing every other Digimon movie is missing: the Digirap.
Digivolution is up and running. Did you see? Did you hear? Did you know it was coming? A Digi-Destiny starts today. Let me hear you say.
Number 5, The Revenge of Diaboromon. While the first 3.5 Digimon movies never received a proper adaptation, many actually did. In 2001, Disney bought Saban and with it the rights to Digimon's English dub. To promote reruns of the first 4 seasons on Disney's new programming block Jetix, Disney brought the original English producers on to do a dubbed adaptation of the then remaining 4 Digimon movies, including The Revenge of Diaboromon. The Revenge of Diaboromon is a potentially canon, maybe non-canon sequel to Digimon Adventure Tri, taking place 3 months after the show's finale. Diaboromon, the virus Digimon from our war game, is back, and this time it's got a different plan. It's going to escape into the physical world. It sets a trap for some of the Digidestined, but then starts sending itself as tiny, low-data versions of itself through people's cell phones before it can finally come together and get big. Revenge of Diaboromon is probably at the bottom of my list for Digimon Adventure movies. It's not bad, it's just not that interesting. The idea of Diaboromon sending itself as smaller bits of data is clever, but in a, kind of way. Not in a, oh, that's awesome kind of way like in our war game. The final battle between Omnimon and Armageddonmon in Tokyo Bay and later Imperial Dramon is awesome. The highlight of these films are the higher quality animation, and it really shows in the choreography. Like Omnimon blasting Armageddonmon in its mouth. That will always be cool. And there's little moments too, like the sound of Matt's harmonica and Kari's whistle coming together to be a representation of Omnimon's energy. That really gets back to the heart of Digimon, which is the kids interacting with giant monsters. Omnimon is defeated and so is Imperial Dramon, but their energy combines to make a new version of Imperial Dramon, Paladin Mode, which finishes the fight. It's cool, and the half-hour runtime makes the film's lack of substance enjoyable. I wish more dumb action movies were 30 minutes. They'd be fun that way. Instead, they're 2.5 hours, and the lack of substance becomes apparent all too quickly. The Digimon movies are cool, because it's an opportunity to see these characters animated well. The action is cool, the expressions are fun, and all around they're just enjoyable. Digimon, Digital Monsters, a line of digital pets created to be an extension of Tamagotchi, but marketed towards tiny, little boys. So muscles and guns and motorcycles and innocent cats turning into scantily clad angels. Like everything else at the time, Digimon was aiming high to be this giant multimedia franchise. An anime, video games, card games, comics, toys. No, Digimon did not start because of Pokemon, but Pokemon affected the entire toy industry, and the way Digimon expanded was in direct competition. Pokemon also helped to popularize the pet monster genre, where the first 2 Digimon anime played into this genre, creating its own unique world. The 3rd series, Digimon Tamers, is a bit of a meta-narrative. taking place in the real world, where Digimon is a popular media franchise. So complete fantasy.
I'd always watch the TV show.
I used to play the card game.
I even made up my own imaginary Digimon.
Tamers is a response to all of these well-loved, popular, and remembered pet monster franchises. Every kid who grew up watching these kinds of shows wanted their own pet monster, and Digimon Tamers fulfills that fantasy. But it also uses a foundation created by Digimon to challenge the audience's expectations. Digimon Tamers is weird, it's dark, it promotes diversity, and its story and characters are a whole lot better than it has any business being. I've revisited the original Digimon series, Digimon Adventure, over and over again over the years, but I really haven't done that with Tamers, so I'm able to look at the series without nostalgia goggles. But it's Digimon, so I need my goggles. Tamers was written by Chiaki, an anime writer who's best known for being dark and weird. Kanaka considers himself to be a Lovecraftian writer, so he's killing that late night Tumblr game. The storyline he contributed to Digimon Adventure 02 was tonally offbeat and creepy. Now make that 51 episodes. That's Kanaka. Tamers is known for its darker tone, but it's never depressing. It's still a hopeful story which uses the dark tones to increase the level of tension when needed and to play off the character's emotions. I like it when kids shows tastefully tackle dark and weird. Instead of violence and blood being used to creep audiences out, it's character actions and surreal imagery, yet it can be just as effective. By the end of Adventure 02, there were a total of 24 main characters, but Tamers takes a different approach. Including the Digimon, the core cast is 6. The main goggle-wearing protagonist is Takato. Takato is a normal kid with normal emotions. He's scared when he meets Guilmon, a Digimon based on his own drawing for the first time. After all, it is a fire-breathing monster.
Hi, Guilmon.
Guilmon is newly created, so unlike every other Digimon in the series, it doesn't have this deep knowledge of the digital world. It's figuring out how other Digimon work just as Takato is.
I'm Takato.
Takato-man?
I'm not a Digimon.
Takato is very anxious, so dealing with the unpredictable childlike Guilmon creates a great chemistry. Henry, or Lee if you're watching the Japanese dub, is a non-violent, morally driven kid who doesn't even like to make Digimon fight in the video game. So he's a little dweeb. In the best way possible. Terriermon is Henry's partner. It's an excitable little rabbit Digimon who always wants to get into a fight. Henry, the pacifist, and Terriermon, who turns into Gargamon. Wow. Side note, I love how the English dub makes all the gun sound effects, laser sound effects. What a simplistic solution to that problem. But like, how do you censor something like this? Well, at least it's not Gundramon.
It's not very smart to mouth off to someone bigger than you.
Henry, Momentai.
Momentai. It means no worries. For the rest of your days. Then there's Rika, or Ruki if you're watching the Japanese dub. Rika is the Digimon queen. She's like really good at the Digimon card game. Because of that, everyone thinks she's cool. As I said, complete fantasy world. Rika is violent and sort of serves as a first antagonist for the series. She's always picking a fight.
Hey!
What a lousy fighter. But a fight's a fight.
Renamon, Rika's Digimon, wants to be the strongest, so at first they have less of a friendship and more of a working relationship. But eventually they admit to caring about one another. Renamon is a fan favorite for reasons which can only be explored with safe search off. Y'all are nasty. One of the benefits to having a smaller cast is the Digimon are now their own characters with unique feelings, perspectives, and development. There's also more focus on side characters. We learn about Takato's friends, the villains, the families of the characters, and get some side character arcs which take the whole series to pay off. Other characters which later gain more importance include Calamon, a silly, lighthearted Digimon who holds the power to help other Digimon transform. Impmon, a sort of rude and pathetic Digimon who renounces his partners. Jerry, a quirky girl Takato has a crush on. Jerry is the only realistic character in this whole show. People like Jerry, but it's because she keeps her love of Digimon a secret, just like me, from age 11 to 20. Put your beard on, you're embarrassing yourself.
Down here, not on me.
Sorry.
Man, you're heavy.
Yeah.
Digimon Tamers plot is a slow burn. The entire focus of the first third is how Digimon interact in the real world. However, to make this concept fresh, the Digimon now are less like little, ugly people and more like, well, digital monsters. They're animalistic, it's in their programming to want to fight, and human-like emotions are now learned rather than something Digimon are automatically equipped with. When Guilmon sees a threat, its eyes contract and its instinct kicks in. The kids have to learn with the Digimon, and the Digimon have to adapt. This helps to contrast the dangerous fantasy monsters with the mundane town of Shinjuku, which features real-world locations. Hiding Digimon has never really been a huge problem in the series because they've always been relatively small. But Guilmon is like a buff velociraptor. Takato can't just hide him inside, so a lot of the early episodes are dedicated to finding Guilmon a place to hide, which is complicated by Guilmon's desire to explore and play. Digimon transform into stronger, larger versions of themselves. This is called Digivolving. In past shows, Digivolving came quick and easy, happening very soon after the series started. And once it was done, Digimon had no problem turning back into their base form for the sake of convenience. It takes a while for Guilmon to finally Digivolve for the first time, and after it happens, he can't easily go back to normal. The next episode has Guilmon stuck as Growlmon, a giant T-Rex-sized Digimon. What follows is a series of attempts to get Guilmon to transform back to normal and find a place for this giant monster to hide. It's cute, it's funny, but also Takato has anxieties about losing Guilmon. It's a great balance and creates a problem out of something which was previously normal. Between the challenges the kids face just having their partners, they also have to defeat evil Digimon which appear in the real world. Takato and Henry are in the mindset the Digimon are living creatures, but Rika wants Renamon to kill them all and absorb their data to become more powerful. One of the things I don't like about Tamers is how they handle the enemy Digimon. This layer of fog automatically forms which blocks the outside world from seeing what's going on. In Tamers, so much of the focus is Digimon interacting with the real world. It would be much more interesting for the characters to have to try to hide what's going on while the Digimon are fighting each other. It would also make the worries of the government organization Hypnos much more meaningful if we see the damage Digimon are causing. Digimon is known for its action sequences being interrupted by long transformation scenes, but now there are Digimodifying sequences. The kids use cards from the official Digimon card game to give their Digimon extra powers, and for just $4.99 a pack, so can you. Sometimes it's cool and sometimes it's funny watching little old Terriermon with a giant hammer. I like the concept of Digimodify, but they play it off as if the kids are using a strategy when it really feels like they're just throwing down modifications until something works. If the rules of the game were explained, it'd be more interesting to watch the kids develop the strategy with the cards. It does work to make them more involved, but it doesn't really invite us into their thought process. With Digimodifying, Digivolving as a means of victory is downplayed. For one, it's not always accessible. Usually Calumon has to be present and eventually a special card has to appear to activate the next stage. When it does happen, the sequences are crazy cool when they're animated in 2D.
Matrix Digivolution.
There's this whole black and green Matrix vibe to them, which really helps to sell that digital aesthetic. Tamers tells one story with a beginning, middle, and an end, which is why it feels like such a slow burn. By episode 12 of Digimon Adventure, the first story arc had completed, but Tamers is barely getting started by episode 12. First time viewing, the show may feel like it's dragging, but I watched the first half a second time for this video, and I have to say it's a lot better on a repeat viewing. The show does feel like it's sort of starting this simple story arc when 12 Digimon based on the Chinese zodiac start attacking Shinjuku. Each episode has the kids beating one of the 12 Deva, so you think it's going to be this clean boss battle style arc where they beat one every episode, but then everything changes course when Calumon is captured and brought to the digital world. It sets up a simple, predictable storyline just for the purpose of changing course. That's great. Even when they finally arrive into the digital world, it's nothing like the way it was in Adventure. Instead of the Narnia-style fantasy world, it's this desolate wasteland filled with scraps of data trying to form into something more meaningful. It's specifically withholding the familiar, but if you're part of the Japanese audience, eventually someone familiar does come along. Ryo. Oh yeah, Yay, who? Rio was supposed to be this familiar face for Digimon fans, a character whose back of the head made a 2-second non-speaking cameo in Adventure 02, and he was the main character in some Japan-exclusive games for everyone's favorite console, the Wonder Swan. Good old Rio on the good old Wonder Swan. If you didn't have a Wonder Swan growing up, did you even have a childhood? Reading through Kanaka's notes, which I highly recommend to any fan, it seems like the role Rio plays may have been considered for one of the characters from Adventure. But I guess from a story standpoint, it makes more sense to use Rio as a connection, as we learn Rio is from the Tamers universe. But it doesn't provide that feeling of familiarity it's supposed to for an American audience. And if you've seen any of my videos, you know the way I mispronounce words means I'm very American. So like all of my other reviews, I'm watching the English dub. I do that because it's what I grew up with. Sure, it's a different product than the Japanese dub, but it's the one I want to talk about because it's what I have a connection to. But Tamers dub is more respectful to the source material than the other two are. It's worth noting Tamers dub wasn't handled by the same team, and often it's actually Steve Bloom of sexy voice fame writing the dub. He also plays blonde Spike Spiegel and Gilmon. That's right, the same guy who did this.
I love the kind of woman that can kick my ass.
Also does this.
Play now.
I wish I could.
The theme song is still the same from the previous shows, but it's remixed with this grittier electric guitar. I really love the casting in the English dub, except for Susie.
They're so pink and pretty.
One of my biggest pet peeves are the way that English dubs handle little kids. I can't stand it.
Hello.
How dare you? I particularly like David Wittenberg as Henry and Bridget Hoffman as Jerry. There's a realism to their performance. It's imperfect. One of my biggest problems with the dub, however, is actually the music. In the first half of the series, they reuse a lot of the music from the English dub of the Digimon Adventure series. It's more fantastical and does a disservice to Tamers' attempts to establish this as a different world. But at least Digimon Tamers doesn't have the Digirap. The series is all about perspective and change. All of the main characters have different philosophies which drive them, but they grow with time. Every time a new villain is introduced, we learn they're not really the villain. One of the benefits of having a smaller cast is the focus on side character development. Specifically Impmon and Jerry, whose stories kind of coincide with one another. A big change which is made is a downplay on destiny. The kids in Adventure were chosen to be partnered with their Digimon, but in Tamers, the Digimon and the human have to agree to be partnered. There's more of an effort to make the kids involved in the fight, and this idea of kids and Digimon choosing to work together pays off with the Digimon's final evolution, biomerging. Takato, Rika, Henry, and good old Rio all combine with their Digimon to become super strong. As a kid, I hated this, but as an adult, I love this. I understand what they're going for now. Focusing on the partnership as a two-way relationship makes the relationship more meaningful. These characters weren't chosen for one another, they picked each other. However, that also makes it possible for Digimon to renounce their tamer and makes it even more brutally heartbreaking when one of the Digimon dies. Impmon can't digivolve because it abandoned its tamers. Two little brat kids. But Impmon makes a deal with the leader of the Deva, Maltrace. It'll help him digivolve if he destroys the kids. This isn't a threat which was suddenly introduced like many of the villains in Adventure. This is a character we saw develop and get desperate enough to come to this point. We also see Jerry want to become partners to Leomon and how much the partnership means to her when it finally agrees. That's why it's so effective when Impmon as Beelzemon kills Leomon and absorbs its data. Impmon's character arc continues when it later reconnects with its tamers and becomes desperate to earn Jerry's forgiveness, leading up to one of the most emotionally resonant moments in the entire franchise. In an act of desperateness, Beelzemon calls upon Leomon's data and uses the Fist of the Beast King, Leomon's signature attack. Tamer's dark tone really expresses itself within the final third of the series. After Jerry loses Leomon, her body becomes possessed by something called the D-Reaper. We get a nightmare from her, and her emotionless body inhabited by this emotionless being is just unsettling. The scene that got under my skin specifically was Jerry attacking her little brother. Something about little kids being violent just... ugh. The final villain isn't a Digimon. The D-Reaper was a program created to clean up scrap data and AI files which were too large. It was created by the team who created Digimon as a sort of cleaning software. All the villains are good guys in their own eyes, but the D-Reaper has no philosophy. It's just cleaning up a mess, which happens to be, you know, life. The forms it takes are just so unsettling, and it uses Jerry's voice to communicate, which is also just, it gets under your skin. The ending of Tamers gives no time for celebration. It's sudden, and it's more bitter than sweet. But it leaves the audience with a small glimmer of hope that the kids may one day see the Digimon again. Tamers is something truly unique. It creates something that is great and genuinely creative out of a franchise which is really just meant to sell toys. And I think that's why people love it so much. It's not a toy commercial. I mean, how do you sell this? It's a sincere and emotionally grounded story, using the desires of kids to create a well-meaning fantasy. With the 15th anniversary Blu-ray of Digimon Tamers, there was a special audio drama CD which featured all of the characters in 2018 and ended on a cliffhanger. Konaka has expressed interest on a proper return to the Tamers world, but of course I love the series and I would be open to it. However, after watching Digimon Tri, I really don't want to see where Digimon would bring Renamon. Y'all are nasty. Number 6, Digimon Tamers, Battle of Adventurers. This one originally premiered on July 14th, 2001 at the Toei Summer Film Festival, and its English counterpart aired on October 16th, 2005 on Toon Disney. Digimon Tamers is one of the most unique and plot-driven children's anime. It's weirdly dark, very character-oriented, and had a continuous plot which didn't leave a lot of room for filler. This description can be said for a lot of anime, which is why I am ever so baffled at the expanding list of non-canon or canon-ish anime movies. There's a never-ending fan theory community dedicated to figuring out which 2 episodes of an anime a movie can fit between, you know, without affecting the plot too much. That's what Digimon Tamers Battle of Adventurers is, except a movie-exclusive character shows up towards the end of Tamers. So I don't know. Battle of Adventurers is 51 minutes long, so it's the longest of the films based on an existing anime. Part of the reason it's this long is because there's a lot of moving parts. I also think it's a good time to mention that the auteur of Tamers, Chiaki J. Konaka, had no involvement with this film, as Tamers was still ongoing when it premiered. So Takato and Henry, 2 of the main characters from Tamers, are spending their summer vacation in Okinawa. Takato wants to hang out with his cousin, but Henry wants to see some nerd stuff. Meanwhile, Rika is in Shinjuku just hanging out. Then all of a sudden, Omnimon, possibly from Digimon Adventure, is in the digital world, and he needs to stop Mephistomon, who's the reincarnated version of Apocalypse, also possibly from Digimon Adventure, from destroying humanity. Meanwhile, some girl who lost her dog to drowning is sad about the virtual pet her dad made her to replace her actual dog. Using these virtual pets, Mephistomon unleashes Digimon onto the world, but the virtual pet replacement dog is really a Digimon, V-Pet, and vaccine made to kill all the other virtual pets, and it does. And now they're all dead, like all of my other V-Pets. Then Mephistomon turns big and they beat him up at the end. Okay, there are so many ideas and things at play here, and a lot of moving parts that end up having to come together. Minami, the girl who lost her dog, is treated so horribly. The film is almost mean-spirited towards her. She's sad about her dog, then her virtual dog comes to life, and then the virtual dog dies, and that's her story. Poor girl. DoesTheDogDie.com has about half of their servers dedicated to this one movie. Battle of Adventurers looks really nice, however. The tropical aesthetic, the animation, it's all beautiful. There are some really cute moments with Guilmon and Takato's cousin Kai, but ultimately, it's not playing to Tamers' strengths. Digimon Tamers is so dark and so visceral. This is just a bad Digimon with an evil plan. In Tamers, the kids were so worried about killing Digimon, and here they're just taking them out like they're little flies, murdering them. And it's a shame too, because Mephistomon is so cool looking. It's just basically the torso of Satan and the thighs of Jonathan Joestar. I wish something more was done to play to the strengths of Tamers. Especially in a non-canon/canon-ish movie, there's a lot of room to do whatever you want with the characters and story, like including characters from Adventure. So it is implied this is Omnimon from Digimon Adventure, but my question is, why couldn't you just let the kids from Tamers meet Matt and Ty? That would be fun. It's harmless in this context. Just give us a small little crossover, because what are these movies besides kind of being fan service? I said I believed Revenge of Diaboromon was the perfect bite-sized movie for mindless action, but Battle of Adventurers drags on a lot. It definitely has its moments, and it's truly beautifully done, but I do want it to be more like the material it's based on. So quick question, have you seen these movies or heard of them? Because I know they did air in English on Disney Channel, but I'm not sure if they ever aired more than once, so they may be pretty obscure to an English audience. And if you have seen them, which ones do you like? Because it's also hard for me to find out what the common consensus is for these films. Number 7, Digimon Tamers Runaway Locomon. This one first premiered at the Spring Toei Anime Festival in March 2002. It takes place 6 months after the end of Digimon Tamers, so all of the Digimon have returned to the human world, and they're planning something for Rika, which she seems pretty mad about. All of a sudden, a train misses its stop, and we soon find out it's Locomon, a trained Digimon who's speeding all over the place, all fast-like. Takato gets on the train, leaving Guilmon behind, and Rika and Renamon are able to get on as well. The rest of the cast, including the Hypnos agents, are all working together to catch Locomon. Takato finds out that Locomon is being controlled by a parasite Digimon who also controls Rika. The parasite makes her remember some pretty sensitive childhood memories. They all find out Locomon is heading to a digital rift, and if they don't stop it in time, it'll unleash chaos onto the world, making evil Digimon come out and attack. The team finally catches up to it and defeats the parasite Digimon. Locomon rides off, and we find out everyone was planning a surprise party for Rika. How nice. Rika sits away from everyone, appreciating what they've done for her, but at a distance. Like Battle of Adventurers, this movie did not have the direct involvement of Konaka, but both the writer and director were heavily involved with Digimon Tamers, so it still feels really connected to the world. Konaka even complimented the work they did on the film. What I like about many of these Digimon movies are the self-containment of them. They're usually well-paced, and it's always a treat to see Digimon animated well. And I say this a lot because it really is awesome to go from this to this. While I did enjoy it, I wish the tension and consequences of Locomon hitting its destination were more dire and urgent. I get that unleashing bad Digimon into the world is bad, but that's a problem that characters could solve and overcome in the event of it happening. Not to compare this to the golden child of Digimon movies, but the consequences of our war game is something that the children couldn't solve if it were to happen. In fact, I kind of want to see Locomon hit its destination, because that just would mean more giant monster fights, and I do like a lot of giant monster fights. I think a lot of the character interaction along the way in this film is really nice and cute, like Henry accidentally taking Lotmon, his sister's Digimon, by accident. Guilmon is just this pure baby boy, and watching him try to get to Takato is so great, and seeing Beelzemon for even 2 seconds before getting wrecked is a bit of a treat. However, I think the highlight of this film is Rika's arc. We know through the series that she has a strained relationship with her mother due to the fact that she had Rika at a very young age and is busy working on her career. So Rika was primarily raised by her grandmother. Throughout the series, Rika's father is nowhere to be seen, and her relationship to him is never explored. However, here we get glimpses of their relationship. What I love about Rika as a character is the fact that she's so quiet and reserved, and the way this relationship is explored in the film is also very quiet and reserved. We know Rika has complex feelings about this, but her reaction to having this memory just come back to her in such an extreme way is to quietly reflect on it. It really shows her growth from the angry character at the beginning of Tamers to a more contemplative one now. Her anger being replaced by a more contemplative, yet still emotionally distant character leaves a lot of room for her character to continue to grow. And it really makes me want more from the series, because I truly believe there is so much more to explore here. Digimon was one of the first serialized shows I was exposed to, but it was hard to watch it all. I didn't originally see every episode when it was airing, and there was no complete set of VHS volumes released, just a few here and there. It wasn't until after YouTube came around that I was able to completely and legally watch all of Digimon together. I finally got to rewatch all of Adventure and the other Digimon series, which I only caught a few episodes of as a little guy. Tamers and Frontier, a show which just completely turned me off. Part of what makes Digimon Digimon are the partner Digimon, a special digital monster chosen or handpicked for a certain kid. The kid's relationship to the Digimon will often act as a surrogate to show how the kids learn and grow up. The relationship between the kid and their Digimon was something that I really valued in the series. I was so in love with the partner concept that the idea Digimon would get rid of it was genuinely upsetting. In Frontier, the cast didn't partner with Digimon, they turned into Digimon. But this seems to be many people's only complaint about Digimon Frontier. I remember liking Frontier when I rewatched it all those years ago. So it's time to realize something. There have been tons of great stories where the main character doesn't have a Digimon. The Iliad, Citizen Kane, Gossip Girl. Digimon Frontier isn't bad because the kids transform into Digimon. No, it's bad for completely different reasons.
Beans? They've gone off without us again. Did you say they have beans?
You are a small sliver of light in this dark, dark world. But first, I really don't want this to be an angry review. I'm not coming at this from a place of anger or from a desire to rant. I was just bored while watching Frontier. Consider this my catharsis. Frontier takes place in its own universe separate from the other Digimon shows. It begins one evening with every child ever getting a phone call by a mysterious adult telling them that they need to pursue their destiny and board a train right before 5 p.m. The kids are all taken to the digital world. While most of the children go home, 5 in particular start hanging out with one another. Their cell phones turn into detectors, which allow them to transfer data from the digital world and channel the power of the legendary warriors, allowing them to turn into Digimon. They eventually learn they were chosen over every other kid after arriving in the digital world to put an end to some ancient evils. The plot to Frontier is simple, but it's genuinely well constructed. There's early foreshadowing to things that don't pay off until the very end of the series, and the conflict of the entire show involves this ancient feud between the higher powers of the digital world. But there's a lot of filler, and the world built doesn't seem to reflect what we're told about the lore. We learn about this ancient war between beast-type and human-type Digimon. Eventually, the war ended and 3 celestial Digimon took over to govern the digital world. Cherubimon, a beast type, along with Ophanimon and Seraphimon, 2 human types. Cherubimon turned evil and raised a beast-type army to usurp the other 2, which it was able to raise due to the belief that beast-type Digimon didn't have enough political power. This backstory is told over and over again, but we never see this conflict between the 2 Digimon types outside of when the backstory is explained. The kids get beast-type and human-type transformation, but that's really all that's mentioned from it. There's also a lot of filler, and filler can be great. A single episode does not have to drive the plot forward. Filler can be good for world development. But when it feels disconnected from everything else, the world seems to be less real. And let me tell you, this world is already not very real.
We'll give you back to your partner in exchange for our women.
So initially, the cast of Frontier is made up of 5 characters: Takuya, Koji, Tommy, Zoe, and JP. Besides their perceived role in the show, leader, little kid, angsty boy, I couldn't tell you much about their character. I can tell you what happened to them and the character beats they want you to recognize, but it all feels so one note. Tommy is a little kid who needs to learn to fend for himself. Okay, he does, like 5 times, and every time he learns this exact same lesson, they frame it like it's the very first time he's ever even thought about it. JP and Zoe had trouble making friends, but now they know the true meaning of friendship. And Koji, well, Koji has attachment issues because his mom died when he was very young, and now he doesn't want to get too close to his stepmom. Oh, but there's a big twist in the middle of the series. It turns out his mom isn't actually dead. His dad just lied to him so he can get his dick wet. Yeah, you don't need to play nice with stepmom anymore. She probably knew about the whole thing. Also, turns out Koji has this secret twin brother, whose primary conflict is he's being controlled by an evil Digimon. Once he finally joins the team, he adds nothing to their dynamic. Takuya, well, Takuya wears goggles. so he's the main character. I think a lot of the problems I have with these characters is I don't really understand their dynamic.
I'm not sure I'll ever understand them.
I feel like with this many filler episodes, there should really be a strong chemistry between these characters, but the filler is always used to explore a new set of Digimon characters. The character drama which is introduced is either repeated until it's obnoxious, or completely not relatable. Of course, in fantasy stories there are unrealistic situations, but the good ones have human emotion lying underneath everything. It should be drama from character interaction with magic, not character drama because of magic. In the original Digimon show, the problems the characters faced were fantastical and whatnot, but the motivating factors for the human characters weren't. Worrying about a loved one, living up to high expectations, being attracted to your... In Digimon Frontier, there's a lot of situations where an external magical force causes character conflict, like a Digimon infecting Tommy's dreams, not being able to control a powerful spirit, an evil dark force controlling your actions and obscuring your memories. It's boring, because there's no proxy for that feeling in real life. Jeremy Renner, I get it now. I hope you're doing okay. Frontier also has a way of making its villains overstay their welcome. There are one-off villains here and there which are fun, like Ice Devimon, but that's only because his English voice is a Christopher Walken impression.
Do you have tasty data like those others? Yummy.
But a large part of the story involves 5 evil legendary warriors who are just the worst. Okay, I actually do have a dub-specific critique. If you're gonna come up with an obnoxious quirk for a character's voice, like talking like Gollum,
what I do no business of you.
A mobster.
Yo, you want us to rough them up for you?
An Englishman.
Thou should study an opponent first.
Or a Southern Belle.
Stop sneaking around behind our backs.
Make sure they're not characters who are around for nearly 30 episodes, and please make sure there are extensive scenes where they're all interacting with each other with their silly voice. Every time they're going up against a villain, it's the same exact thing. The villain wants to scan data from somewhere to gain more power. The kids lose. The villains win, until eventually the kids get more power. I feel like Digimon Adventure and Tamers did the right thing with their villains. Although the same power dynamic happens between those kids and the villains, usually there's another story unfolding while the characters are either trying to reach a similar goal or stop the kids from succeeding. In Adventure, they gotta get home, and maybe stopping this villain will help that. Or they have to save a kid before the villain gets a hold of them. It isn't until the end of the series where the plot is solely we have to defeat the villain. And when they do decide that saving the digital world should be their primary objective, we've had over 40 episodes of meeting characters and understanding the importance of this place. It's something they have to learn to care about. But Frontier is literally driven by the fact that the kids don't know what they're supposed to do, and they're on their way to a location where hopefully they'll find out what they're needed for. There's no motivating force. The characters always have the option to go home. They choose to stay in the digital world because, I don't know, it'll be fun, I guess. I think the backstory to Frontier is well thought out, but how the characters interact with that story is not.
I really don't want this to come off as an angry review. I think getting angry at media you don't enjoy is kind of silly. If you enjoyed Frontier, that's great. And just for you, here's a list of things I actually liked about Digimon Frontier that really didn't fit into an organized setting.
I really enjoy the dynamic with the kids' guides, Pokemon and Nemon. They have this really adorable chemistry.
Hey, do you think this would bounce? Ugh. Give me that!
I like it when Cherubimon, Seraphamon, and Ophanimon are reborn as their rookie stages and all play around with each other. It's adorable. I like how there's no strict adherence to the power scaling of Digimon levels. If you want a champion level Digimon, stage 4, to beat up a mega level Digimon, stage 6, it should totally be able to as long as it serves the story. I really appreciate how the English dub cut out fan service for an 11-year-old, and also I love the English dub theme. It kicks ass, which is such an upgrade to the weird original theme song, which I love nostalgically, but it really isn't so good. Yo, if this video gets 10,000 likes, I'll do a cover of the Frontier song. I don't even sing, but I'll do it. I feel like Digimon Frontier gets a bad rap for changing up the formula. And you could argue it was doing something new, but I really don't think it was. The concept of kids turning into superheroes through a transformation sequence is seen all throughout anime. It was Digimon doing something different, but it wasn't trying anything new, it was conforming to something that already existed. I wanted to like the show because the only bad thing I've ever heard about it was the kids turned into Digimon, but that's only the reason why people dismissed it. I wanted to be able to say, give Frontier a chance, but it's not good. Its characters are boring, the world isn't consistent, the story moves slowly, it's repetitive, and then it also changes the formula. I consider Digimon Frontier the end of classic Digimon. In America, Saban had been purchased by Disney, who took over dubbing with Frontier. In Japan, Digimon took a 3-year hiatus from producing anime. I can't help but to feel like the lack of interest in Digimon Frontier is what forced the series to take a hiatus, which caused American interest in the franchise to begin to fade. Shows need casual viewers to succeed. Not everyone can be a hardcore fan, and whenever I talk to anyone who even barely watched Digimon growing up, they always say they stopped watching with the one where they turned into Digimon. I feel like if the show were engaging, people wouldn't have dismissed it, regardless of the big change. But unfortunately, those who were skeptical of the change, those who needed to be convinced of the concept, had nothing to grab onto.
Digimon was so heavily perceived as a Pokemon clone. To get past that stigma, it had to be better than Pokemon. And when it wasn't, people stopped paying attention. Alright, now that I've done Digimon Frontier, I think I'm going to take a hint from the Digimon production team and take a little bit of a hiatus from Digimon content. And by that I mean I've already started watching the next series because I have already started getting requests for it. Love y'all.
Number 8, Digimon Frontier, Revival of Ancient Digimon. This one premiered at the Summer Toei Festival in July 2002 and October 23rd, 2005 in the United States. This was also the final Digimon movie to be translated into English until Digimon Adventure Tri. Now, I want to say, I'm not a huge fan of Frontier to begin with, so if you like this movie and like Frontier, that's okay. This is just me expressing my opinion, it's not meant to disprove your opinion. While traveling through the desert, the cast of Digimon Frontier come across two groups of feuding Digimon. Continuing with the conflict of the show, one side is comprised of human-type Digimon and the other side is comprised of beast-type Digimon. The human types are led by Darkmon and the beast types are led by Hippogriffmon. The kids try to take sides in the conflict but ultimately decide to try to foster peace between both groups, because two of the Digimon are children and friends and their friendship is threatened to be torn apart by all of this fighting. Meanwhile, part of the group discovers an ancient mural telling of ancient Greymon, ancient Garurumon, and Ornismon, ancient guardians who both sides want to return in order to bring peace. However, someone takes the time to, actually read the mural, and they find out that Ornismon is actually quite evil. And if the conflict continues, enough digicode will be collected to bring Ornismon's return. It's revealed that Hippogriffmon and Darkmon are actually the same Digimon, being a slide evolution version of Murmuka's. This one. Ornismon is resurrected, but so is ancient Greymon and ancient Garurumon, who help to defeat Ornismon, and then everyone is happy. This one bored me. I was bored by it. Once again, I'm not big on Digimon Frontier, so if you like Frontier, you may enjoy it. I know there's a lot of slow build-up here, but it does seem slow. I didn't really get the conflict between the two groups beyond the existing conflict which exists in the show, and by this point, I've kind of forgotten why all of it happens. But I assure you, I have not forgotten that I promised I would do a cover of the song. I just need to learn this gosh darn instrument first. Also, I don't understand why the kids choose the sides they did beyond the fact that that's the side they were introduced to first. However, I do like the twist that Hippogriffmon and Darkmon are the same character. That's a smart decision which plays into the Digimon mechanics introduced in Frontier itself, which is something I'm always a fan of. This one disappointed me because I did like the 02 films even though I'm not the biggest 02 fan. So I was kind of hoping this one would make me want to give Frontier another chance, but alas, it did not. However, I'm still open to it in the future. Number 9. Digital Monsters X Evolution. So first and foremost, I'm sorry the quality for this one is bad. From my understanding, the only DVD release of it is quite rare or just doesn't exist, and I couldn't find a better quality version of it anywhere online. Airing on Fuji TV on January 3rd, 2005, X Evolution is the first original feature-length Digimon movie. And if you couldn't tell, X Evolution was the first and only entirely CG Digimon film, and the only film which was made for TV. Unlike the other Digimon movies, X Evolution is not based on an existing anime. Instead, it takes many of the plot elements from a line of Digimon toys and turns them into a 77-minute feature-length film. The Digimon X Pendulum, which was the fourth variety of Digimon V-Pet, was the model for the Digivice featured in Chronicle and D-Cyber. And a lot of the lore that still sticks with Digimon to this day seems to have gotten its first stories in the Chronicle-based toy line. The story of Chronicle is about the digital world being cleansed by its primary ruler and the primary server of the digital world, Yggdrasil, or as the English adaptations call him, King Drazel. Using a virus called the X program, Drazel hopes to eliminate 98% of Digimon, basically to clear hard drive space. However, certain Digimon develop an immunity to the X program called the X antibody, which causes them to mutate into slightly different versions of themselves. At the same time, there are new species of Digimon being born who naturally have the X antibody. Drazel's Royal Knights are called in to slaughter the remaining Digimon. You know, for kids. I've always been aware of X Digimon, but I never really was aware of their lore. The best way I can describe them is that they're the edgier, cooler version of Digimon. I mean this in a better way, but it kind of reminds me of things like Lunatics Unleashed or that Xeriously Force cartoon that Homestar Runner did a few years ago. Knowing the general story of X Digimon beforehand helps a lot because for the most part, X Evolution drops you in thinking you are kind of already familiar with it. The film follows the story of Dorumon, a small Digimon who carries the X antibody through a strange stone on its forehead. The stone makes Dorumon an immediate target for Digimon looking to gain the vaccine and also makes it a social outcast. Dorumon lives in a digital world already being wiped out by Drazel and its Royal Knights. However, some stronger X Digimon help to defend the world, all while Dorumon tries to protect itself and a Tokomon, which it befriends. Gallantmon, one of the Royal Knights, defects from King Drazel due to the moral conflict it's having by carrying out all of the orders. Along the way, many stronger Digimon die, leaving the protection of the world in the hands of Dorumon. The head of the Royal Knights, Omnimon, continues to kill Dorumon's friends, but eventually they just keep coming back to life. Dorumon eventually digivolves into the same kind of Digimon Drazel is using to wipe out the world, and all of the other Digimon are like, OMG, what are you? Dorumon confronts Omnimon, who decides to also deflect from King Drazel, and then Dorumon digivolves into Alphamon. Alphamon and Omnimon defeat the big, bad, evil Dorumon and King Drazel. Dorumon dies, but then comes back to life, and Tokomon comes back to life too, but now as an X-Digimon, and then they laugh and play the end. I was really excited to watch this. I remember enjoying it when I was really young, but it's just kind of a chore now. First, I had absolutely no prior knowledge to the X antibody storyline before I watched this, so I spent a lot of my brain energy while watching this trying to figure out the story. Now, it's not super confusing, and I was able to put all the pieces together all right, but it wastes no time jumping into it. I mean, the first scene is a Leomon hunting Dorumon, then the Leomon dies, and then the Leomon asks Dorumon to live for it even though it was just trying to kill it. I mean, they waste no time killing Leomon this time. It happens immediately, and now I don't know what to expect from the story. Once again, the story isn't incredibly difficult to understand, but following the story is how I expended my mental energy while watching it, which totally distracts from anything else going on. The movie's just grim and depressing. I mean, nearly 98% of Digimon have been murdered, and now we're watching this lone Digimon survive as all of its friends get murdered. I'm not saying everything needs to be upbeat and excitingly happy, but it's not engaging. It just bums me out. Finally, the aesthetic of this movie is ugly. While I appreciate the attempt to do 3D, especially on a TV budget in 2005, I'm watching this in 2018, and it's really hard to judge the film as a piece from its time. It looks like unrendered Dreamcast or early PS2 cutscenes. and that would be fine, but the Digimon are animated with zero weight. They move around with ease and land with absolutely zero impact. It's floaty and super distracting. If I'm distracted from what's going on because I'm trying to follow the plot line, I'm disinterested in the movie aesthetically, and I'm just bummed out from when I am able just to sit back and watch, I'm not really going to be interested. While I appreciate this movie for forcing me to do research about something in Digimon lore that I only really had a passing knowledge of, the movie itself didn't do anything to inform me or to really entertain me. Digimon was consistently airing from 1999 to 2004. Sure, there were 4 different series with 4 different sets of characters, but they aired within weeks of each other. The final of the original run, Digimon Frontier, was the largest departure in terms of the original concept. Although finding critical consensus and audience reaction from its initial release is hard, the original Japanese ratings were abysmal when compared to the other series. It would be nearly 3 years before the next Digimon series, Digimon Savers, would air in Japan, and the English adaptation, Digimon Data Squad, had a 4.5-year gap between it and Frontier. Now, I never watched Data Squad, but I did watch Digimon Savers as it was airing through uploads to YouTube. But when I watched it illegally on YouTube, that was like 12 years ago, so I think the statute of limitations is up. I remember liking Digimon Savers, but in the same way that I liked Shadow the Hedgehog. It just felt like a more grown-up version of something that I already liked. But looking back on it, that was very superficial. While doing this Digimon retrospective, Digimon Data Squad, Frontier, and Fusion have all come up as the ones people consider to be the worst. I don't think Digimon Data Squad is good, but the problems it has are totally inoffensive. There aren't major structural issues, boring characters, or boring concepts. It's just kind of soulless. Digimon Data Squad has a slightly older cast than the other Digimon series. The main character, Marcus Damon, is 14 years old and he meets up with an Agumon, the same kind of Digimon from the original series. He's told he'll either have to let Agumon go back to the digital world or join a special government organization called the Data Squad, DATS. More like DAT-ass was edited out of the English dub, am I right, homies? DATS is essentially the Men in Black, but for Digimon. They even have those little memory erasure sticks. They'll receive a call about a Digimon causing trouble or investigate something weird which ends up being caused by a Digimon. Then they have to deal with it by beating it up. Although the premise begins with this concept as its foundation, the series evolves to tell more of a traditional Digimon story. They meet enemies with increasingly stronger power levels, and they have to digivolve to transform to a more powerful level to beat them. A lot of the Digimon series after Adventure felt like a spin on what you'd expect from Digimon. But Tamers so far has been the only series to take advantage of its unique concept. The Data Squad is like a detective agency. There should be questions and intrigue. There are mysteries and secrets throughout the show and revelations that may result in a kind of reaction, but there's not an ongoing investigation into these things. Well, at least not on screen. Who killed Laura Palmer wouldn't be interesting if every episode of Twin Peaks didn't involve an investigation into her murder. Digimon Data Squad mentions a mystery, spends enough time to have you forget about it before handing you the answer to a question you forgot you were briefly curious about. Why are Digimon coming into the human world isn't interesting because 1, we've seen it before, and 2, because it's not an answer being actively worked towards in each episode. We learned Marcus's dad went missing in the digital world. Okay, but for that to be shocking, we should have asked about him and wondered where he was before that revelation came. Instead, it's just presented as if it were sort of a fun fact. The Data Squad premise feels abandoned, and although it plays into the plot later on, they literally abandon it. The main cast goes against what the federal government wants and basically have to play by their own rules, which essentially means fighting and no investigating. But Digimon's strength has never, ever been because of the plot, so let's take a look at the characters.
I don't know who you are, but you're standing in the middle of my turf.
Our main should be wearing goggles character is Marcus. Marcus is an aggressive little lad. Marcus wants to be the world's ultimate fighter, so he goes around challenging everyone and punching Digimon in the face. Agumon gains some respect for Marcus and decides to follow him around because Marcus is the boss. Marcus has this attitude that the best way of going about a situation is to jump into the fight and be the first one to hit somebody. At first, this sort of gets him into trouble, but he never quite grows out of this attitude and continues to start every fight by punching a Digimon. I really wish we saw Marcus get his ass kicked at some point. The characters Age and Agumon were added to attract older fans back into the series. There's a sort of edge to Marcus's character and Agumon. Marcus has to punch other Digimon to activate a DNA charge to get Agumon to Digivolve. When Agumon does Digivolve, he turns into a more aggressive looking version of the original evolutions to Agumon. Instead of the bubbly Greymon, there's Geo Greymon, complete with red stripes and a spiky body. Instead of Metal Greymon, there's Rise Greymon, with a really detailed crotch. A lot of people don't like the fact that Marcus has to punch Digimon, but I don't mind it. It's fun to an extent, but I really wish he got his ass kicked at some point. Then there's Yoshi, an 18-year-old member of DATS who first tries to convince Marcus to join. She's a sort of mentor figure to Marcus and the other younger members of DATS. She and Locomon, her Digimon, have this great chemistry. It's almost like they're roommates who happen to work together. Locomon turns into Rosemon, who doesn't have a $500 figure. Yet. Oh, by the way, look at this slick English dub edit. Then there's Thomas, the final main DATS member. Thomas is a 14-year-old super smart, super rich boy who needs to analyze everything. He's a sort of foil to Marcus's personality, and eventually the two learn to respect one another. Thomas's partner is Galmon, a little wolf creature who's always calling Thomas Sir. I feel like the relationship between the DATS members and their Digimon are more of a working relationship rather than a friendship. Agumon is always calling Marcus boss, and Galmon calls Thomas sir. It's a subservient role, which makes it hard to accept how fondly they discuss their friendship. It also doesn't help that the Digimon are huge when compared to other seasons, and sometimes they're drawn super anthropomorphized. They're too human, they could almost just be another employee of DATS. There are moments of comfort and reassurance from the Digimon in other series, which help the kids to learn from their mistakes. But that is not the case here. It's not a sweet relationship, they're work friends. I don't buy it when they talk about how important their relationship to their Digimon is, because if they didn't directly tell me, I would never know. However, there are also a lot of charming side characters in Data Squad. Marcus's sister and mom are fun and have a great chemistry with Marcus, who's like this super aggressive teenage boy. His mom is just super relaxed, but she's also this strong parental figure for him. Then there are the other Data Squad members. You really get the feeling that the Data Squad is a team who all operate well with one another. The commander and the two communication people are fun, and they've all seen action before. We even get to see their Digimon Digivolve and participate in certain fights, which is not something common in other Digimon series. And finally, there's Keenan, a young boy who was lost in the digital world when he was small. He was raised by Digimon, so he's grown up to have this resentment towards humans, but also he thinks he is a Digimon, which is why he speaks in broken English.
Me hate them.
You know, because he was raised by Digimon, who all speak perfect English. Keenan's partner is Falcomon, who acts as a sort of older brother to Keenan, being a much less aggressive and more level-headed character with the same views towards humans. Falcomon and Keenan have more of a proper relationship. Falcomon often guides Keenan and helps him to realize the good relationship Digimon and humans can have. Their relationship works because they help each other grow. As I said, there aren't inherent structural problems to the plot. The show begins as an episodic, almost procedural show about the DATS team. This time is really used to introduce the audience to the concept of Digimon. As the show goes on, however, we're introduced to a more streamlined plot which builds on top of previous plot points. The center of the show revolves around the relationship between Digimon and humans on a political level. The story doesn't reveal how everything plays together immediately, but as different characters are introduced and different viewpoints are given, the individual puzzle pieces are eventually brought together to make a more holistic story. Essentially, when Keenan first went missing, a small team, including the commander of DATS and Marcus's dad, all went into the digital world to find him. One of the search party members grew a distaste for Digimon and basically attempted genocide. Keenan grew to hate humans because of this. Marcus's dad stayed in the digital world to save his friends, the commander went on to form DATS, and the relationship between human and Digimon continued to sour. I like the idea of different parts of the plot revealing themselves over time, but the way it's revealed often feels stupidly cheap. The first time we learn about Marcus's father is from one of the prominent Digimon in the digital world. It asks Marcus if he's related to Spencer Damon. Marcus tries to answer, but the Digimon literally cuts him off and says, "We're done talking."
Damon! Is it possible you're Spencer Damon's son?
How do you know about my father?
I am through talking!
Why'd you ask, man? Why'd you ask? Everyone in the show knows about Marcus's dad, his mother, the commander, the villain, but Marcus in the audience doesn't know about him. It's not information the character has to learn, but it's information withheld from him, which makes the revelations feel really unearned. Any of the characters could have decided at any point to reveal this information to him, but they just decided not to until it was dramatically convenient. The plot which eventually unfolds is just this generic story with themes and ideas which are no different than any other Digimon series before it, which is a shame. The idea of the Data Squad is really a unique spin on Digimon. Although the characters are technically teenagers, it often feels like young adults working their first job. But they didn't lean into that too much, just like they didn't lean into the investigative work of DATS too much either. This is a show which should have been intriguing and interesting, but it ends up playing it safe, and because of that, it's only passively interesting. Savers and Data Squad wanted to be Digimon for a teenage audience, but the way it goes about that is through a slightly different coat of paint. The characters are older, they're drawn more realistically, and through superficial means, the story seems somehow darker. I mean, a human villain commits Digimon genocide and then becomes Satan, because that's metal as heck. But when you start diving into the content of the show, it's very shallow. If you take the time, a show like Digimon Tamers can be thought-provoking. It uses darker themes and tones effectively to engage the audience, build tension, and to raise stakes. But Data Squad does it solely to make the show appear cool to adolescent kids who are afraid to admit they still watch a kids show. I mean, it worked on me when I was 11.
For the most part, I wasn't bored while watching Digimon Data Squad. The boring moments pass quickly, but I wish I could say more than just, well, I wasn't bored. Digimon Data Squad is the first of these series I've reviewed that just sort of blends in with the rest of Digimon. There's nothing about it that makes it stand out. It's not horrible, it's just kind of there. And hopefully one day I'll have a Rosemon figure and it will just kind of be there on my shelf.
And finally, number 9, Digimon Savers the Movie Ultimate Power Activate Burst Mode. I love how so many of these movies just have these titles that are never ending. Released on December 26, 2007, this movie takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where an evil plant Digimon has overgrown the city and taken all of humanity captive. The Digimon from Digimon Savers and Data Squad, Agumon, Gaomon, and Locomon, have to traverse through the city to defeat the evil Digimon, while accompanying another Digimon who looks like a human girl named Rhythm. Eventually, they get to the very top of the city where the bad Digimon awaits. Agumon burns it, allowing his partner Marcus to be released. Marcus punches the bad Digimon because he has a habit of doing so, and Agumon digivolves to Shine Greymon. But the plant Digimon digivolves too. Luckily, Shine Greymon gets the ultimate power activate burst mode, the movie. They beat the bad guy up and then they win. The end. So if you watched my review of Digimon Data Squad, you know I didn't totally dislike it, but it definitely was in the bottom half of the Digimon shows for me. However, I really enjoy Digimon Savers the Movie Ultimate Power Activate Burst Mode, the movie. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a 20-minute short film with 3 strong personalities going to save someone they care about. It's easy to grasp, it's just a journey movie, and it's genuinely charming and fun. Also, it's technically post-apocalyptic, and it's technically a darker story, but it's not depressing. Part of what I like about it is, for the most part, the Digimon are in their base form. They're tiny, so a lot of the action is in these smaller locations. I know I've said multiple times that I like the giant monster fights, but I also like the little monster fights. The highlight for me is the Gaomon fight in the restaurant, and of course Locomon using sausage links as nunchucks. It's just genuinely adorable and funny. I was even glad to see Marcus at the end of the movie. I don't mind him like most people do. I think his kind of dumb, loud, and obnoxious character helps to counteract the more serious and dark tone of Digimon Data Squad. Of course, the film has an environmental message. The plant Digimon kidnaps the humans for pollution reasons and whatnot. I feel like besides the Digimon's monologue, this theme completely doesn't carry any weight throughout the film. It seems like it was just a motivation added on because the plant Digimon is kind of cool looking and they wanted to use it. Which, that's fine. I don't need a super deep villain motivation. Just use something that works. However, after seeing this plant-type Digimon, I really want a Biolante-type Digimon. The highlight of the entire short comes during the credits. Just like a classic Pixar movie, the end credits feature a series of bloopers with the characters messing up their takes or special effects going wrong. You know what? My headcanon for this film is that all of the Digimon got together and made a movie. I mean, it's not canon, so that could be plausible. However, despite being really entertaining, Digimon Savers 3D The Movie, Argomon's Revenge, Ultimate Power, Activate Burst Mode, the movie, didn't really do well at the box office. If you look at the box office numbers for all of the Digimon movies, it's not hard to figure out why there was no Digimon Cross Wars or Boy Hunters films. It's even a good measurement for how Digimon has slowly lost popularity with time. Each film past the adventure movies made less and less money at the box office, with the highest grossing earning 27 million, and the lowest, the last film, earning less than 1 million. However, Digimon Adventure Tri's series did fairly well at the box office, and hopefully that fares well for the upcoming Digimon Adventure film. So anyways, I'm going to beg for comments and likes just like I'm supposed to do. Do you think you would enjoy to see these movies translated in English, or would you just kind of want them to be released as subtitles? Have you seen Digimon X Evolution or even heard of it before this video? Because I rarely hear people talk about it. I really do think English fans would enjoy to have a re-release or just release of these movies because they're truly really enjoyable. However, if and when they are re-released or just released, they better include the Digirap. Let's go! Digimon! Over the last year or so, I've been watching all of Digimon. As a kid, I saw every season, and although I knew I liked some more than others, I enjoyed every single one. Revisiting the series, the seasons I enjoyed more as a kid are still my favorites, but for reasons I didn't really know how to articulate. There are many things within the series I appreciate more than ever. Even the seasons I didn't like too much have redeemable qualities, like Nemon. I just like Digimon, like Nemon. When I initially started talking about all the Digimon series, I really only wanted to do what I had seen. However, I can justify not watching something like Applemon because it's technically a spin-off, but Digimon Fusion or Cross Wars was the only series I hadn't watched as a kid, so I might as well check it out. When Digimon Cross Wars first aired, I checked out the first episode and I wasn't really into it. For the first time, I felt disconnected to Digimon because of my age. Digimon Cross Wars and Fusion feels like a kid's show, and I can't really say that for the other shows. Digimon has always felt like it's a show about childhood, a celebration of childhood, which is nostalgic in its nature, not really within its iconography, but within its content. The best Digimon seasons aren't just shows for kids, they're shows about being kids. Digimon Fusion, however, is unapologetically a show for kids.
DigiFuse! We live in a digital world.
Which is weird because I've never felt that way about the other seasons. I'm fully aware this may be because I didn't grow up watching it, but I didn't really even feel this way about the seasons I didn't like. Although the show isn't totally void of redeeming qualities, I often found it boring, repetitive, and lacking substance. I'm not alone on this. Fusion didn't do well critically in terms of ratings, and many within the fan community see it as the worst season, but it's also the season which almost killed Digimon. I'll be referring to this season as Digimon Fusion, and as the characters to their English names, because it's what it's more commonly known as. Even so, the English dub exists. People watched the English dub, therefore it's worth talking about just as much as the original version is. However, there was easy access to the original dub, so I watched about 15 episodes scattered throughout the series to compare the two. Most of the issues I bring up aren't even dub specific, except for the editing of Mervamon. I guess you can't go a single season of Digimon without having explicit fan service. Last time the fans were void of it, they got a little
creative.
When the show begins, we're introduced to Mikey Kudo. He and two friends hear a distress call from a hurt Digimon who somehow has slipped into our world. They rescue him and then are transferred to the digital world. There they meet a whole bunch of Digimon, including Shoutmon, who wants to be the king of the digital world. Unfortunately, the digital world is fractured into 108 different zones, with a code crown holding the power over each one. It's a race between our main group, the Fusion Fighters, and several other armies to collect the code crowns. There's Blue Flare, run by a human named Christopher, and the Bagra army, led by the evil Bagramon. Using a fusion loader, a device mysteriously given to him, Mikey can collect Digimon and have them fuse to make new combinations. Over the course of the series, Mikey makes new friends, catches new Digimon, and comes face to face with increasingly stronger enemies. The collection of each code crown is usually split between 2 episodes, where Mikey and the gang spend time fighting Bagra henchmen, making new friends, and meeting the locals. Oftentimes, the Fusion Fighters will only win because of the aid of a new Digimon who joins up with the team. The characters in Digimon Fusion are either passable or completely misrepresented versions of other Digimon archetypes. Mikey makes a good leader because he thinks goggles are a cool accessory. Marcus Damon doesn't like goggles, so he will be deemed a failure. I like Mikey. I mean, I would like Mikey if he were a real person. He's very agreeable, a loyal friend, and makes several fatal fashion decisions, which means he doesn't really have anything to prove to anyone. But he's not an interesting character. When talking with the other kids, he'd always rather go with someone else's plan because he doesn't want to start conflict. But guess what makes stories interesting? Conflict. He has no immediate apparent flaws except for his weird quirk where he feels the need to save people, which is a pretty odd character trait for a preteen to have. In the Japanese dub, Taiki's catchphrase is, "I won't turn my back on them," which is a similar concept, but much less dramatic than a need to save people, which implies Mikey has had, on multiple occasions, an opportunity to save someone's life or watch them die. He's a 13-year-old athletic prodigy, so that's pretty neat.
The man drives underneath, they move to cut him off, and holy ravioli, there he goes, into his patented all-star super spin! He's up, kitty! Totally faked you out.
He decides to help Shoutmon save the digital world and achieve his goal of becoming the Digimon King. And then you have his friends, Angie and Jeremy. I sort of started to like them. I thought they were charming enough, but they leave the main cast halfway through the show and it was suddenly a lot better, so I guess they're more dead weight. Angie just wants to get home and Jeremy wants to be seen as anything but dead weight. But he is. Oops. Christopher is the new Matt, but a lot less like the good Matt and a lot more like the bad Matts. Christopher wants to be the best, but he doesn't like teamwork, so he's gotta be the best on his own. Unlike Mikey, Christopher's Digimon are color coordinated and robotic, so you know he means business. Christopher's storyline is that he doesn't think teamwork is valuable. Then he learns the value of teamwork. At least until the next time we see him. Then he has already forgotten the value of teamwork and he needs to learn the lesson again and again. Then he forgets it, gets tempted to the dark side, and learns the lesson again, over and over. It's exhausting. I like him a lot more when he finally joins up with the team about 2/3 of the way through, but until then, he's just boring and brings attention to some of the more repetitive aspects of the show. And then there's Nene. I like Nene's presence in the show, but she's not very interesting on her own. Does that make sense? She's kind of aloof, and I was having trouble nailing her personality down, so I looked her up on her wiki page. Nene is an enigmatic, beautiful girl who leads a mysterious army. Okay. But like in terms of her mysterious personality, once the mystery is solved, there's not much there. Nene is like a new friend who never talks. You think they're all mysterious and whatnot until you find out they're just kind of boring. Mysterious only works if there's something to reveal. Nene is looking for her brother who disappeared into the digital world. When we first meet her, we get to know her motivation, but then we don't hear about it for like 20 episodes, and it's brought back up the episode before we see her brother. So even her motivation isn't regularly apparent. When we do meet her brother Ewan, he's just kind of whiny and he thinks the digital world is just a game. So he wants to kill everyone so he can win. But then he's proven wrong. I'm sure glad that's not a repeated plotline in all of Digimon. And then there's the Digimon. There's a lot of irregularly appearing Digimon because each of the characters has this huge collection. All of Christopher's Digimon are boring, but Mikey's highlights are Shoutmon, a feisty red Digimon who wants to be the king of the digital world. At first we believe it's because he's selfish, but he really wants to protect weaker Digimon. Ballistamon, a boombox, and Darulamon, a drill lion who used to be evil but is now not. And also there's Beelzemon, who's a more boxy version of this Beelzemon. Nene has Sparrowmon, a prettier version of JJ the Jet Plane, the Monotamon, the super cute, fun little ninja spy Digimon, and later, Mervamon. This series' justification for 13-year-olds to believe they're old enough for Digimon. Mervamon is fun. She's super eager to run into battle, and in the English dub, many shots of her are censored. There are many gratuitous butt and cleavage shots which were totally edited out of the show, which is completely justified for a children's television show. The idea of Digimon fusing isn't really taken advantage of. The core line of evolutions the series sees is Shoutmon fusing with someone to make Shoutmon times 2 through 7. But because it's branded as Shoutmon, it ends up feeling like a standard evolutionary line rather than a cool combination option between all the characters. Early on, the Pikmon are fused to make a wide variety of different objects, which is a fun, creative idea, but eventually they just become a sword over and over again. There's a moment towards the end of Fusion where a bunch of cool combinations are made, and a moment where they're trying to make a Digimon laugh, so a bunch of funny combinations happen. But I feel like the fusion thing is mostly a creative potential which is consistently slept on. I think part of the reason I was turned off by fusion initially were because of the Digimon designs. Although Digimon has always been a glorified toy commercial, the Digimon designs always felt like they existed separately from the toys. However, the Digimon in Fusion all look like they were designed as toys first. Ballistamon, Shoutmon, and Beelzemon are very sharp looking. It looks like they were made as an easy toy mold. Shoutmon has screws in his elbows, and I know they all have mechanical designs, but I really don't think that's because the director liked robots. Even Darulamon has a super wide stance, which would make it easy to stand up, to have the legs be separate parts and whatnot. However, there's no Mervamon figure. Yet.
Digifuse. There we go, I got a Mervamon figure. Alright, that's good. Okay, you were grabbing onto my Edgemon figure. Okay, there we go.
Halfway through the show, Mikey, Angie, and Jeremy all travel back to the human world. Shoutmon is granted the power to digivolve, which admittedly is a cool moment, but only because it's seen as something unique and special, and it happens late into the series. Only Mikey goes back to the digital world, and once he does, over a year has passed, and Lord Bagra has basically won. Christopher, Nene, and many of the other Digimon Mikey has collected are now missing, and they later have to reconnect. Instead of collecting code crowns, the show's format is now about defeating the 7 Dark Generals, a group of villains appointed to the 7 zones of a resurrected digital world. I have to admit, I enjoyed the second half a whole lot more than the first. Its pacing and structure is just a whole lot easier to follow, and it's more enjoyable. It's nothing profound or special, it's just Digimon fighting and cool transformations and whatnot.
Digimon doesn't have to reinvent itself to work. The kids don't have to turn into Digimon, be cops, or travel around the world looking for objects. All that they have to do is beat up bad guys. And what separates a show worth watching multiple times and something worth having on as background noise are the details in that. The ideas, the characters, the themes, all of which are incredibly weak in Digimon Fusion.
Fusion is a bit disoriented with its many different characters and plot points. I feel like the easiest theme to point out is Shoutmon's philosophy of believing it is the responsibility of the strong to protect the weak, or friendship always wins or whatever. Although I didn't really like the previous 2 seasons too much, I always felt like the creative team was taking advantage of an opportunity to have a creative voice. But in many ways, Fusion feels like whoever was writing it was just phoning it in. And I may be wrong, but it's just so vanilla, like Smash Bros without items, or missionary work. Digimon Fusion is a series many people didn't watch. In fact, it was the lowest rated show of the entire franchise. So much so, it was almost cancelled during its run in Japan, which from my knowledge has never been the case with any other season. What saved Cross Wars were the toy sales. That's right, Darullamon's thigh gap saved the show. When Fusion was localized, it was picked up by Nickelodeon, who aired the first episode and then missed the subsequent time slots for the next 3 or 4 episodes. There was no consistent airing, and they moved it to the Nicktoons channel, where the rest of the series aired. Digimon Fusion had a pretty good line of toys in the US as well. A relaunched card game, toys, and video games all were released, but I can't imagine any of it did too well. After Fusion, the next 2 shows in the series weren't localized, several video games weren't translated, and the most recent card game wasn't either. It was only because of fan outcry that a subtitled version of the more recent games have been released, but not all of them were financially successful. It would be a fair conclusion to say Digimon Fusion nearly killed the series in the West. However, while Fusion ended, there was a follow-up season in Japan. Digimon Cross Wars, the boy hunters who leapt through time. Hunters takes place sometime after the first series. We're introduced to a new character, Tigeru, and his Digimon, Gumdramon, a little excitable Digimon. Most of the other cast is pushed aside, with Ewan and Mikey staying around. Even though the other characters come in and out, Tigeru and Gumdramon are the main focus. Tigeru is a little interesting, but just because his motivation is to become better than Mikey, a character who was written with limited flaws and an unreasonable athletic skill. This totally seems like an acknowledgement of how he was a boring character. Instead of traveling to the digital world, the characters travel to the digital courts, a place in between time and space, the human world and the digital world. Each episode has a Digimon finding a desperate child and creating trouble in the human world. Then the team beats it up and captures it. There's a much larger focus on collecting Digimon this time around, which is an interesting thing to see within the Digimon franchise. This series is significantly more episodic than Fusion, which makes its repetition less noticeable, because there's not an end point in sight. With Fusion, I was just waiting for them to fight the big bad, but the big bad in Hunters only serves as a cool finale episode in which all the old Digimon heroes come through time and space to defeat Quartzmon. Even though it makes no sense canonically, it's a pretty hyped moment, and it all ends with Tigeru saving the day, not only surpassing Mikey, but all the other heroes too. I enjoyed Hunters a lot more than the first seasons. If you're going to make a show episodic, make it truly episodic. I have no hot takes on it because its issues are totally inoffensive, and its worth isn't anything profound, it's just clean, lighthearted fun, something Fusion didn't quite reach.
If you look at the franchise past Cross Wars, what I see is Toei being very unsure of its future. The following season was Applemon, which was a complete rebranding of Digimon, and the next season after that was Digimon Adventure Tri, which went from a series of 26 episodes to a series of 6 movies, which tells me that Toei wasn't really able to sell ads based on the previous mediocre ratings of the show. However, I hope it continues, because I've genuinely enjoyed watching through all of Digimon. The good, the bad, and just the passable. However, I'm not touching Applemon for a while.
Digimon remains one of my favorite shows I watched as a kid. Unfortunately, Digimon has been dismissed by too many people because of its perception as a Pokemon clone. To which I say, probably a little bit. The way in which Digimon was marketed makes it hard to dismiss the Pokemon influence, but revisiting Digimon Adventure shows it was a truly unique and heartfelt story.
Since I was like 5, I've wanted a follow-up to Digimon Adventure, and when Digimon Tri was announced in August of 2014, I was beyond excited. But from announcement to conclusion, my excitement completely died. But that wasn't because of my reaction while watching it. Digimon Adventure Tri was originally supposed to be a 15th anniversary project, released in the spring of 2015, but it was delayed until late fall of 2015, and it was changed format to a 26 episode series to a series of 6 movies. It went from something that would have taken 6 months to complete to something that would take 3 years, with the new installment being released every 6 months or so. I didn't even keep up with it while it was on.
I watched the first movie, which was split up into 4 episodes, so, oh yeah, the series was changed from 26 episodes to 6 movies, and they took those 6 movies and cut it back into 26 episodes. And it feels like it. I didn't watch it again until the 6th and final movie was released. My thoughts? Well, it's interesting. Digimon Adventure Tri takes place 3 years after 02 and 6 years after the original Digimon Adventure. Most of the cast is getting close to graduating high school, and all is fine until the Digimon return to battle off a new threat. Portals from the digital world are opening up all over the real world, releasing Digimon infected with a corruption virus, causing them to become stronger and violent. Between it all, a new Digidestined Mako shows up with a mysterious little cat Digimon, Mekumon. There are many mysterious mysteries, such as the identity of 2 government agents, the disappearance of the cast introduced in 02, and why everyone's Mickey Mouse hands shrank. This review will contain spoilers. Where Digimon Adventure was about the kids growing up and taking on responsibility, Digimon Adventure Tri seems to be about how the kids' relationship to the Digimon changes as they're getting ready to put on their big kid pants and become adults. They're trying to figure out their careers, and the writers are trying to figure out how to connect the out-of-character careers made at the end of 02. How does Matt, the rock star, become an astronaut? Well, he just thinks of it on a whim. I think one of the flaws for having the relationship to the Digimon be a focus is the fact only Gatomon has ever really been developed as their own character. The rest of the Digimon have only ever served as character complements or contrasts to the kids. They don't really have their own development apart from them. Usually their personalities can be described with one-word quirks: hungry, sassy, silly, etc. There's a point in Tri when the digital world has to be rebooted. The Digimon lose their memories of the kids and their shared adventure. Yeah, nothing about them changes because their entire experience during adventure did nothing to change or evolve their character. My relationship to the kids is what defines my relationship to the Digimon. Unless time is spent developing the Digimon as their own unique characters, then we're not going to feel for their perspective, only the kids. When Patamon is infected, I feel and worry for TK, not Patamon. 26 episodes is plenty of time to further develop their characters, but unlike the original Digimon series, the plot is complicated and a little convoluted, so more time has to be spent pushing the plot forward than spending time with the characters. With a cast this large, usually the better option is to go with a more simplistic plotline, so you can spend more time with each character. There's not a lot of urgency from the characters, and that's primarily because there's no motivating force to get the characters to take action. As much as I like the scenes at the spa, the school festival, and the subplot about Izzy being more fashionable because he likes Mimi, it feels out of place when there could be a Digimon attack at any moment. There's also little concern about the fact that the 02 kids are missing, which would be a great motivating factor for the kids to get up and do something which could drive the plot forward. Instead, we're just waiting on a Digimon to appear into the city to drive the plot forward. It's entirely out of the characters' hands, and instead, the plot is progressed through seemingly random occurrences. Although I feel like the plot is kind of lame, the basic foundation of the story is really solid. A Digimon virus which makes Digimon act violently is a really interesting idea, and the way the lore is expanded ties into a lot of the aspects of Digimon lore which I never thought would be explored within the adventure timeline. Yggdrasil or King Drazel was introduced in other Digimon series. The idea of the Quantum Sea, the network connecting the digital world, Dark Ocean, and that place was explored within Adventure 02, but never given a name. Learning more about homeostasis, a being which was only briefly in Digimon Adventure, was also appreciated. Finally, my mind was blown when I learned the identities of the 2 government agents were 2 of the original Digidestined, which were only briefly talked about in the original series. And the decision to make their partner the Digimon Sovereign was super creative and a clever twist. I've long wanted to learn about the original Digidestined. I have revisited the Digimon Wiki over and over again, hoping to find new information about it. I even read fan theories. However, a problem I have with a lot of high fantasy series is there's not an easy way to answer questions about the lore without compromising the plot at hand. That's why compendiums are published about things like Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. The worlds created for these series are far more expansive than the story being told, and there's not a lot of opportunity for the characters in the primary stories to interact with people or beings that have knowledge of the deeper lore. And sometimes when a story is specifically created to explore the lore, it can be really messy because it favors clumsy exposition over plot progression. Digimon Tri feels messy at times. The two biggest entities driving the plot are homeostasis, a being which desires peace and balance in the digital world, and King Drazel, the self-proclaimed king of the digital world who is a Digimon supremacist. These divine beings have no physical form, instead they have agents acting for them, but they're not even the primary villain. There's not really a primary villain to beat. The closest thing we have to that is Meicoomon, the partner to the mysterious new Digidestined, Mako.
Alright, sit down and get your comments ready. It's time for Billiam's Hot Takes. Get out a glass of milk. These are spicy.
A consistent argument I'm seeing against Mako's character is she's a Mary Sue. Okay, that doesn't really describe a problem, those are just buzzwords. Essentially, a Mary Sue is a female character who is flawless, has unexplained talents, or is a self-inserted character. Basically, people who use the word unironically will just create new criteria for it so they can continue to use it as a critique. Let's examine these. So Mako isn't actually a self-inserted character, the argument is just being made because she's shipped with Tai, who's the main character of Digimon. It's common in fanfiction for writers to put themselves in a relationship with the main character. Mako and Tai being shipped together is fine by me because it's not like they hook up or anything. He just wants to call her at the end of the series. That is the extent of their relationship. And are you aware of how teenagers date? There's no character or relationship building involved, it's just, let's date. Sometimes not even that. Next, is Mako flawless? I mean, she's certainly self-conscious, and this is explained in the series. She speaks a different dialect than the rest of the kids, she's new, and her Digimon hasn't evolved yet. Combined with the fact her Digimon is, well, murdering other Digimon, and yeah, it makes sense that she's a little self-conscious. Now, what about being super talented with no explanation? Well, oh my god. Okay, she's pretty okay at sketching. That wasn't explained. I definitely needed a 7th movie in the Tri timeline to explain why she's pretty okay at sketching. This is totally unexplained, oh my god. Now Palmon is making a sketch too? I've watched all of Digimon and I've never seen Palmon's artistic abilities explained. What a Mary Sue. Calling Mako a Mary Sue is just creating a scapegoat for more of the problems within the series. It's an easy buzzword to throw around, but it's not productive or constructive. Don't get me wrong, Mei is not a great character, but she's a symptom of the problems with Tri, not the problem itself. But she's necessary for the story they were trying to tell. Meicoomon is infected, and Mako's arc is to make the right decision about needing to defeat Meicoomon. Her arc is contrasted by Himekawa's arc. We see how Himekawa was driven to bring back her dead Digimon and where it ultimately takes her. To evil! But Mako understands for the greater good that Meicoomon has to die. With the focus of the series being the relationship to the Digimon, these are the extreme examples of that relationship. The 4th movie isn't called Loss for nothing. Wait a minute. However, she comes to the conclusion about Meicoomon needing to die way before the action takes place, meaning her arc is done way too early. In the 6th and final movie, it's Tai who ultimately decides Meicoomon needs to die, and he convinces the rest of the kids. It should take until the end for Mako to come to this conclusion, and it should be up to her to convince the rest of the kids. We should see more of the struggle she goes through to come to this conclusion. Witnessing the consequences of Meikumon's violent actions and witnessing how Himekawa went to the dark side to save her Digimon. When Meicoomon finally dies, it's an emotionally effective scene. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't just a little bit destroyed by the "ta much" line. But as for why she's needed for this particular story, can you imagine if the scene where Meicoomon dies was with any of the 8 original kids and their Digimon? Would you want to see them say goodbye to their Digimon, the characters we've been watching for almost 20 years? And they wouldn't be able to make a bold decision like that anyways because it's canon that the Digimon are still alive decades later. Listen, I'm not crazy about Mei, but I'm also not crazy about any of the Tri versions of these characters. My biggest problem with her is her name. Couldn't you name her something a little different than her Digimon? Mako refers to Meicoomon as Mei-chan, and Mimi gives Mako the nickname Mei-Mei. So sometimes when I'm reading the subtitles, I'm not sure who they're referring to. When I first saw the image of the new art style, I was all about it, and I'm still liking it to an extent, but when combined with the voice casting changes and personality changes, I often have trouble recognizing these characters as the ones I grew up with. After watching the first 4 films in English, I went back and rewatched everything in Japanese. There are weird directions the voice actors were given in both situations. My main problem is the weird stoicism all the characters have during stressful moments. I guess their characters are supposed to be grown up, and yeah, 17-year-old Tai is obviously going to be different than 11-year-old Tai, but I feel like the heart of the characters are gone at times. There's not a lot of energy in the characters, and there's not a lot of energy in their performances. Sometimes I'm expecting a character reaction and nothing happens. Sometimes something dramatic happens and the audio cuts out for dramatic effect. But that only works if the moments surrounding it are energetic and loud. You can't go from a quiet moment to a silent moment and expect a dramatic contrast. At one point, a villain takes on the appearance of Ken Ichijoji, one of the 4 missing kids from the 02 cast. From the entire cast's perspective, this is Ken. It's even attacking the kids with the Digimon which belongs to Ken and Davis. However, the kids have no hesitation when they decide to fight Ken and Imperial Dramon. This should be an emotionally conflicting scene. Instead, they hop into battle and even cheer when Imperial Dramon is defeated. Yes, they can be relieved a threat is gone, but they think they just had to fight against a friend of theirs. But nope. Not only do they not acknowledge they just defeated their missing friend, but there is barely any acknowledgement of the kids' disappearances. Kari and TK go to school with 3 of the missing kids, and they're never even like, I wonder why all 3 of them are missing. Eventually, Matt gets a half-assed, indirect explanation from one of the government agents as to why they're all missing, and that's fine enough from all 8 of them. The character's odd behavior and odd performance to me is the foundational problem with Digimon Adventure Tri. I feel like these aren't the characters I grew up with, and the characters have always been the strong point for Digimon Adventure. There's a scene in Adventure 02 where Agumon compliments Tai on how much he's matured and grown up. It's a small, short moment, but it does so much more for me than Tri does with the character throughout all 6 movies. The weaker characters make the show drag on at times. At the very least, I was looking forward to seeing these characters animated well, with decent action, but decently animated shots are made less exciting by poor editing choices, poor sound mixing, and stoic characters. Let's talk about one of my biggest problems that has never been a problem for me with Digimon: the digivolving. You learned that 3D animation doesn't look good in the series before, why are you trying it again? I mean, look how ugly this is. It doesn't help for how long these animations take either. Look at all this dead space where nothing is happening. Part of these sequences could so easily be cut down. If you watch the episodic cut, the runtimes aren't even consistent. They range from 21 to 25 minutes, so there's no reason why the evolution sequences couldn't be cut down. In the original series, the sequences were often edited and sped up to keep up the pacing with the surrounding action, but they just let it play out and try. However, I actually really like the way that the Ultimate and Mega animations look. The 2D animation is very slick, the movement has this rhythmic pacing to it, and this was a bootleg. I found it at a convention. It was like 20 bucks. The implied intensity of the action scenes are never able to be fully realized. There's too much cutting back to the kids, still shots, and interruption. Even excitingly cut scenes are often plagued by unexciting music and oddly silent sound effects and characters. The battle with Alphamon in Reunion should be awesome, but there's this calmer, elevator music style cover of Braveheart playing, and then there's all the silent reactions. I'm so used to yelling and talking in reactions in anime fight sequences. This just makes it awkward. To be honest, Digimon Adventure Tri bores me at times. I would rather have a classic style English dub complete with characters talking where there was no audio before. I have to admit, it can be a little dull. What I'm trying to say is, after all this time of complaining, I sincerely miss the Digi-Rap.
Digivolution is up and running. Did you see? Did you hear? Did you know it was coming? A Digi-Destiny starts today. Let me hear you say Digimon.
There are so many flaws with Tri, which is a shame because its core concept is really creative and interesting. But there's so many conflicting ideas and tones trying to be conveyed. I almost wish it was a full 50 episode series, so more ideas could be explored in depth and the quiet fun moments with the characters could find a natural place. I feel like Tri must have been changed a lot during its production. Making it into 6 movies allowed for extra revenue sources and also would have given Toei a lot of time to determine whether or not they'd leave room for a sequel. I feel like why certain things were hinted at and certain plot lines were left open was because they felt like a sequel was possible. And lo and behold, a new Digimon Adventure movie project is in the works, with some of the original creative team behind the original adventure working on it. At the end of Tri, I'm left feeling disappointed, and ultimately with mixed feelings. I like a lot of the ideas explored, but I wish it felt like the characters I watched growing up. And then the series ends with this. They have the audacity, after disappointing me, to play a cast rendition of Butterfly, the main theme, and suddenly, I love it. I'm remembering why I love this series so much. I love these characters, and I still want more Digimon Adventure. I'm making more Digimon videos, I'm collecting the cards, I'm listening to Butterfly over and over again, and now I'm sitting in a tattoo parlor, and oh look at that, I got a Digimon tattoo. This song, the imagery, and everything about this show is so powerfully nostalgic to me. Yes, I wanted more from Tri, but I'm just happy it exists. The connection I feel to this story and to these characters is the kind which can only be developed through the emotionally vulnerable eyes of a child.
As an adult, the flaws of this series become more and more apparent, but as I continue to talk about Digimon more and more, especially on my channel, I've grown to appreciate it a lot more. And despite the fact that Digimon Adventure Tri was ultimately a little bit of a disappointment, I'm still extremely excited to see what's next. So anyways, thank you for watching me for 3 hours. If you want to watch more of me, there's more videos on the screen, but I don't know why you would. Also, reminder, those shirts based on the Digimon Tamers logo are for sale. You can find them down below. There are links, and my YouTuber merch shelf is there too. Thank you so much. This isn't the end of my Digimon content, but I'm going to take a little break. I'm playing Digimon World on my Twitch if you want to watch that. Anyways, thank you. I'm going to go sleep now.